Okay, it's 6:01, and we will start the call to order, the special meeting for the Georgetown Divide Public Utility District. This will go over the urban water management plan and potential water transfer. If we can have roll call, please.
Director Seaman,
Present.
Director Stovall,
Present.
Director Fisher,
Present.
Director McDonald,
Present.
Director Saunders.
Present. Director Seaman can lead us in the pledge of allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This item is adoption of the agenda. Is there any changes or requests? If not, I would accept the motion.
Make a motion and we adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any public comment on that? Any on Zoom? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. Public forum, any public members have comments for items that are not on the agenda tonight?
We don't take comments on items not on the agenda today.
All right, so we're not doing that because it's a special meeting?
Correct.
All right, so during the what we'll do is when we have the urban water management plan presentations, the public can ask questions throughout, so feel free if you want to stop and ask questions. You'll be able to ask questions back and forth and we'll answer them for you. So with that, I will pass it over to our discussion of the urban water management plan, and I'll start with our general manager.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not gonna use the mic because I'm pretty loud. I just wanted to kind of welcome you all. Thank you for coming, those of you online as well. What we're here today is to get your input on kind of what the future of water looks like here in the district. What an urban water management plan is a long-term look at what water we can provide to you as consumers. Its original purpose was to make sure that when new developments came in, there was enough water to provide for them. They have to provide 20 years of water to a certain size of retail and a certain number of homes. But ultimately, this is what the state looks at to make sure that we're a healthy watershed, healthy water supply, and we're able to supply enough water to our customers, or do we need to conserve water? So you all are aware where our water comes from. Basically, what this plan does is it looks at all the water sources and it looks at all the different types of things that we have to work on and kind of puts them into a report. A lot of people take these reports and it's a wham bam, thank you ma'am type of report where they just do the work that the state asks them to do and they put it on the shelf. And I always felt that that's never a good way to operate one of these plans. These are a living document. You want to make sure that you're doing something that's going to serve you as a community, serve you as a district. So this will be my 4th urban water management plan in my career. So really, these are important because it not only teaches you as consumers what we do, but it also teaches us how we can serve you better as a community. So I just want to introduce the people who are going to give the presentations today. So 2 staff members, Adam Brown, who's our operations manager, and Alexis Elliott, who's our water resource manager. They have been working pretty hard on this as staff members. And then we have Robert Heather, who's with Zenhero Incorporated. They are a consultant agency that we work with on a number of different levels. They've done a number of different urban plans. How many of you guys done now?
A lot. Let's see. So in the 2020 round, we did probably 15 to 20, and we're up to 15 to 20 again this round. So
And I've done my last 2 urban plans with them. So I know their work, I know the quality of their work, and I know they're gonna do a good job for us. Robert's also our grant writer, and they're also our water transfer consultants. So they're a little bit of a one-stop shop for us, and I trust them. Like I said, I've worked with them for a number of years and I know the quality of work that they provide. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Adam and whoever is going to start. But I thank you for coming. If you have any questions, we're here, and there's also some snacks in the back. So please make sure you grab some stuff.
Thanks, Nick, for
I don't think I have to talk about it at all now. So whenever you want to start the presentation, there.
And Adam, if you turn on that mic, it'll help, we could just leave it on, but just turn it on and you could leave it on the podium.
So like Nick talked about, we're here for the first part of this meeting to talk about the urban water management plan. The document that, you know, is prepared every 5 years for water districts, throughout the state. One more, yeah. So the purpose of the plan, is a state requirement and benefits to the district. Like Nick was saying, it kind of really, gives us an understanding of where we're at with our supplies, the demands, and then also meets our state requirement. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, I learned a lot from the last one we did here is how we can really use our supplies, our demand, and apply that to make sure we meet customer needs. Through those dry periods that come with the plan, how we're gonna do that. That's the most important part. It gives kind of a guiding way to go through that process. So it's every 5 years. So pretty standard, you know, we go through 5 year period, then the next 6 months after that 5 years, we kind of prepare the plan, then everything gets submitted to the state by July 1. There's the work on the document itself, and then there's required tables that we'll also put together. A lot of those tables are kind of, some of them, like towards the end of the report, we'll talk about here in a minute, are more, a lot of input from the community, staff, board members to really guide the plan, the direction we want to go. Some numbers are our population, how much water we use, those numbers kind of are what they are. Next one. Yep. So from the 2020 plan, you follow a guidebook that's issued by the state board. That came out maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we're going down that path. What is in that book is there's no statutory differences from the 2020 plan, so we're kind of follow that same thought process throughout. So next, and so couple main purpose we talked about is current and future water use. In our situation, we have potable and non-potable, so we'll look at, the plan looks at both of those supply wise and how much demand we have in the communities. So then this is kind of really the last two sections, drought risk assessment, like normal year, a dry year, 5 consecutive years, and then through for the next 20 years. So we understand, like we covered, understand what the supply looks like moving forward to the district. And then next one. So the end of it is kind of a water shortage contingency plan that gives us those guidelines. If we see a drought, if we see multiple dry years, similar dry years, whatever the situation may be, give us the planning purpose to meet requirements of the community with the supply that we have.
Adam, can I also add to that? With the water shortage contingency plan, that also does have stages. So if there are set stages that the state does put us in, does that give us the guidelines in there as well?
Yeah, so I was kind of later, but that is exactly right. The state gives us a percent reduction for each stage they go through. So it's 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, and greater than 50%. They kind of, the last droughts, they would say you need to reduce your demand by X amount. Say if it's stage 2 is typically a 20% reduction, and then we would say, okay, this plan would say at 20%, what do we need to do? And that's kind of where the discussion purpose is here. That's kind of what we're gonna have as we get through the presentation.
Right, that was one of the things, last time mosquito fire, we were set to be at stage 2. And the state wouldn't give us clear guidelines on raw water versus treated water. and irrigation was gonna cut off, and we had a special emergency meeting to keep irrigation water going, and that's when mosquito fire came out. So I know that's one of the things that Harold looked at, and those are clear guidelines that we're gonna make sure is in our next urban water management plan to make sure we separate the treated water from the raw water. That's all.
What does that mean? What you're
Find out.
saying, it's gonna be clear guidelines between,
When we have to cut between a state mandated versus our actual supply and demand for water.
irrigation and,
So when
So
we
we're gonna-
have to
are
cut
we gonna-
irrigation versus treated water. So if we have
or
enough,
all of the above.
yes, correct.
Okay,
So real quick, this is how, St. Arrow's like, Nick said, number of these, so you can go through all the way to chapter 6 here. This is how the plan will be, is proposed to be set up. Then I'll go through each chapter and kind of what we expect to see in each chapter, and then we'll have, discussion on each one if needed. Okay. So chapter 1 is pretty much just set up the plan. We've talked about that a lot already, pretty basic, why we do it. The purpose behind it, the regulations behind it, so that's pretty straightforward chapter. We'll talk about some of those, like meeting here today. When we have public draft, we anticipate that, for the May board meeting, and then public hearing and adoption in June board meeting to meet that July 1st deadline. Yeah, there's just one more over there. So that, it'll talk about the chapters that building the plan out. So introduction is pretty simple and straightforward. So chapter 2 starts getting a little more within the district. So we'll cover the district service areas, the boundary, what the communities we serve, what type of water we serve, just some history of the district itself. And then we'll get into the demographics of the district. This kind of sets the basis for how we develop our population, our use numbers moving forward outside of 25. Because it's all, we're looking forward, we're looking at what we've done, and we have to look forward with this plan. So this is how we the kind of the baseline of those population numbers. So you can see that's from the end of 2025. Those are the connections we have per customer class. And that's kind of what the state's looking at, that's their various customer classes, and you can see we have majority of our customer base is single family residential homes. And we have some commercial, some government, which would be like your schools or like not hospitals, but like Provide Wellness Center, that'd be a institutional place, or some landscape, so that's Auburn Lake Trails, Georgetown Recreation District. And then our agriculture, our irrigation, non-profit customers. We'll also include a climate discussion in this section, and then also the next section will be our population.
Adam, and also for St. Harold, with the climate discussion, we just is coming out with the Watershed Resilience Pilot Project Program. And we did put a vulnerability assessment from our district in there. Will we be adding that in, at least in some form?
Was it submitted to RWA?
Yes.
Okay, was it finalized,
Uh,
or are they
it will
reviewing
be,
it?
I mean, it's in public hearing now, but it will be finalized, and that's.
Yeah, we should look at it and incorporate the relevant information for sure.
Especially since there's a pathway to funding, and some of our stuff directly from the district is in that.
Adam,
Yes.
what's the date on these? Is this the current numbers?
These are the end of 2025. Yes. Yeah. I did make a small error in the population. It's off by about 25. Yeah, but it's got. We're there. We'll make sure that's correct. We plan is there. So the population. So from our single family and multifamily. That's how we develop the population number, and then. That's what we use. We use the person per connection per household. That's how we're going to develop. That's how you develop that number. That person per connection per household is based on the California Department of Finance. There's not, Barbara might be able to talk a little bit more to this. specifically how that number's developed and, not the specific census data up here that would really give us a good number, so that's the number we use for that. It's very similar to what is in the previous two urban water management plans. 4.7 in 2015 and 2.53 in the 2020 plan, so it hasn't significantly changed. That's really represented by the growth rate that we use below that to develop our population projection moving forward outside of 2025, less than 1%. The 2020 is 1.1%. We came up with the less than 1.1. We're proposing that now because what we saw throughout time growth up here, we haven't seen significant growth. There's not an area where we're gonna see a major subdivision or something come in, in the short term.
One question on that. Have you looked at any increases in ADUs and kind of predict if we're seeing that? So we may not see more housings, but we may see more people in ADUs. So kind of keep seeing what the trend is and keep that in mind.
Yes, so I've been monitoring that since, because what ADU law was 2020 or 2021. And we get a couple a year. That was a significant amount, but I think it's something we're definitely monitoring to see if, that's gonna affect that number. It'll be important.
And then the other thing, I know it may not be within the 5 years, but do we have anything in there about the potential annexation with Quintet?
We do, so the plan right now isn't fully written, right? This is, we don't have that in there right now, but I think that's something we.
I'm answer that, and I'm gonna say, since that's not a finalized project, we do not want to include that process within this. If it becomes something that is onerous in the next, year or so after this is done. One of the reasons why I want to say this is a living document is that those are things that we can add or we can utilize as part of this. So that population is not a significant population to add into this. If it was more significant and we were further along in the process, I might consider it. But even we're doing an annexation of 23 homes as well. And I also don't think that is as onerous because most of the water from that is already accounted for. But so those things are thought of, but they're not necessarily included within the plan because we don't have the finalized official documents just yet.
Or I see that Quintet's gonna have a different supply too. Right, so
That is correct.
Adam,
Discretion.
Yeah.
on your ADUs, are you going by them approaching you or us? Or are you going to the county and asking them for numbers of ADUs? If they're doing remodels or something, so we get because if they're not making a new connection or whatever, they're not gonna be coming to us. So there'll be a different number of construction
Yeah,
through, the county building.
yeah, so as long as it's permitted, because if there's any permitted dwelling up here, any permit, anything, we have to review it, so we keep track of those as they come through. Right, so say if someone X property builds an ADU, they go get a permit, the county issue, we have to approve that permit, so we have to look, based on the resolution you guys adopted, depends on their connection fee, if it's classified as an ADU. Or another single family dwelling, we look at to see if they need a meter, what kind of charge they would take. So yeah, we do, if it's not permitted. That's the story.
Yeah, and then have we looked at any of those Airbnbs that are still out there that are not supposed to be there, but they're there? Did we ever do any research on those to see what kind of additional uses gonna be required from them? I mean, cause we have them up here still
Yeah,
and they're still functioning.
Yeah.
But did we ever look at that for numbers of people, water being used, et cetera?
yeah, so it's definitely, it's something we would look at, but we don't see like a big vacation, like Lake Tahoe, where you'll see a huge increase on the weekend period compared to the week period. We don't really see that big variance in our production numbers.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is that they're here and they're being utilized a lot. Because there's no hotels, motels, whatever, except up in Georgetown.
Yeah,
So the multiple ones that are in like Pilot Hill and around. Um. You know, I don't know how to reach out unless you go on, I guess, one of the sites that you would be renting from.
Yeah.
Do you have something to say?
No, I was gonna try to help answer the question for you. This is something that we've dealt with in certain communities in my previous employment. And yes, there are times where this is taken into effect, and it has to do with the more vacationing communities. It's not as significant here of a need. So we look at those different properties and we see the water usage of the properties, and we don't see anything that's like egregiously over water using when people come in to visit. So, we could do some research. You really can't go on, since we're not a regulatory agency, we can't say whether or not they can be an Airbnb or not. All we can do is account for the water that's being used and make sure that the water is being used appropriately.
Well, then the county also has, originally they were permitted,
Sure.
and maybe pull the numbers for the ones that were. At the time, they were allowed to be legal, that now are kind of rental properties.
I mean, we can look into it, but that's,
I mean, just giving us the different numbers.
sure, we can
Since we want
definitely,
accuracy here.
we can definitely look into that.
Do we see any increased production numbers during events like when Jeepers Jamboree or anything like that? I know there's, seasonal differences that we see.
we see seasonal differences. I haven't seen like a weekend difference.
Okay.
Yeah, seasonal difference for if we have like a break or something.
Right.
Alright, so that's kind of the crux of chapter 2. Well, chapter 2 is, what numbers we're looking at, So chapter 3 is, our water supply. Sole supply, something that has capacity of 21,000 acre feet. For the firm yield is just the maximum consistent rate that a supply could provide year after year. That's what the firm yield means. Water use for 2025, approximately 9,000 acre feet. That's kind of where, that's pretty average for what we use. It can fluctuate, and that's all our potable water use, our irrigation use, and then our losses as well, conveyance losses, or if it's either raw water or treated water. Yeah, so this is another really good opportunity. We're gonna talk more about climate and seeing what different impacts can impact our supply, like the healthy rivers landscapes, climate variability, and that's, I think we're seeing a lot of that lately, is where we're having a deluge of rain events early in the year and not a snowpack, and that snowpack historically in California has been a reservoir. We're not seeing that in the last few years, so that will be a big discussion, and I think that's a discussion we have here too, is how when we get to chapter 5 and 6, how are we gonna look at that moving forward? When we have these drier years, how are we gonna prolong our supply and still meet everything?
For number 2, can we have the water use efficiency regulations? Because that also impacts how our supply is.
The urban water use objectives and making conservation a way of life.
Yes.
Yeah, so typically what we do is we try to take a straight face projection and then kind of compare what the back calculating and compare how that would, the performance under the urban water use objective regulation kind of pans out.
Okay.
So that's kind of part of the analysis, generally kind of behind the urban water management plan. It informs it to ensure that we're projecting an efficient water use moving forward. So it may or may not end up in the final document itself, but you do know that it is being considered while these numbers are being developed.
So the near term is typically your 5 years, just put it out there. The district doesn't expect to have, additional supply within the near term. There's different projects we're working on, long term, come into play. Chapter 4, our water use characterizations. This is our numbers for 2025 and what each customer class used in acre feet. So Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, just numbers, so with those numbers and the numbers from chapter 3, or chapter 2, that's how we build out our projection, right? We use population numbers with water use numbers, and we get how much we see, 20 years, 5 years, 20 years down the road, and what we can expect demands on the system. This includes our potable water, non-potable, and our water loss. DC treated 190 acre feet in the conveyance, that's both treated and non-potable, it's charging our ditches, and running our ditches here in the irrigation system.
Can you reflect on what those numbers were at the 2020 water management plan?
Yeah, so over time, our conveyance losses are going down. They have been up as high as, closer to 4,000 acre feet, but annually they do go down. That's in correlation to our canal lining and how we operate the system. So it keeps getting lower and lower, and obviously the goal is always to have none, but I don't think we'll ever have no loss, but yeah, it is going lower and lower.
So it's safe to say we've conserved about as much as the single family dwellings through conveyance.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a nice way to think of it.
yeah, when you look at that open canal, you don't realize how much water is really going through that compared to what potable use is. You look at the canal, like that's even during the summer when we're running irrigation water, you think there'd be a lot more water in the canal. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing, if we could highlight the reduction in the water loss, that's a good significant story to tell. And that's also one of our pathways for funding, because we could get state and federal funding to keep reducing our water losses by the canal lining, piping areas that are at risk of erosion and those kinds of areas. So that's a good story to tell.
And there are entities that I'm aware of that have fully piped their open canal systems, quantified the savings from that, and then identified that portion of water to transfer on the market at a later date. So there are options that we could look at for sure.
That's an important part of the plan that you bring that up to. Part of this plan is to developing projects for, water reliability. In the document, so we can get that kind of funding.
When I look back at the 2020 urban water management plan, there was a loss then of about 500 acre feet more than what we have here. So over 5 years, that's 2,500 acre feet. When I looked at 2015 and 2010, there wasn't anything in there, is my guess. And at that time, we didn't have a way to measure that. But I believe both through conservation, the customers are doing, and also what the district is doing to cut those losses through lining and piping makes more available, like you just said, for water transfer.
And the landscape part, is that like what are those?
Like Parkland Trail Golf Course,
Is there anything more besides that?
Georgetown Divide Recreation District is landscape.
Maybe the schools,
The school,
do they have a separate meter for the landscaping, or?
They don't. No, they don't. They're a government institution. I'm trying to think of anything. Yeah,
Garden Valley Park, maybe?
that's Georgetown Divide Recreation.
Gotcha.
District. Yeah. The others are kind of the two.
Cause when you're talking, say, when we have to do our cuts, if we're looking at 1305 acre feet, or all those number potable water, and then the landscape for potable water is 58. That's more than 20% if we cut out that irrigation off that potable water use line. And just cut that instead of always taking irrigation only.
And I think that's in the stages. I think landscape goes first in the stages.
I mean, that's what we should be considering, is that all that landscape, cut that out as part of our, if we have to ever do reductions, that's part of our reduction.
Yeah, that's a discussion we had, like how I want to handle that.
Yeah,
Yeah, but that's the two main landscape customers. I'm not thinking we have it. Yeah, I know they have a couple meters over here that make up that number.
Yeah, I was just looking because, you know, we had it every time, it's always been, we're cutting irrigation. And it's instead of just cutting irrigation, let's look at cutting it across the board of what's kind of wasting water. We don't need a golf course. We don't need the grass wherever. You know, if it's domestic, let's ask family use only.
Yeah, so typically, that's the goal, to cut all of them, you know, when you have a.
Yeah, but we never do.
Yeah,
It's in there. Well, do we have a copy of the plan? Is that here at all, the stages?
It wasn't in there.
2020 plan,
Yeah,
yeah, it's there's just the like table of the spreadsheet here.
yeah, it has the big ones, not the actual shortage plan, so. Maybe next time we'll add that for our next board meeting, so people can see at each stage what's done on the treated side and irrigation side, because
Well,
both are in there.
well, it just depends on what it is, right? It's just,
Yep.
it's just a percentage, so it's just across the board. In the plan we'll have, in the water storage strategic plan has each level and what those levels mean, what the action items are, that way, you know. Something that's definitely.
Yeah, that's what I looked at, like, added up all what we had there on total water usage, 1305. Well, if you take 20%, well, that's 26.
260.
Well, if you cut that 58 out, came on, we exceeded that number.
Yeah, and that's why it's a living document now, so it comes to the board every month when we're doing the water supply and demand assessment.
I'm
And we
not,
could make those regulations of what we want to do.
I'm not sure that would be enough to meet your 20% requirement. 58 would not be enough. You'd have to cut other
So
areas.
what I'm saying is looking at both areas
Oh, yeah.
for
I
the
understand.
cuts,
I
not
understand, but
just one.
I completely agree with you. What you have to be careful with is, health and safety is not cut first. And I understand what you're saying about the landscape stuff. But some of that is still considered health and safety, so we have to make sure that we're fulfilling the regulations that are within the state system.
Safety. Golf courses on health and safety.
I'm not saying golf courses are, but the parks are. The parks are considered health and safety.
Yeah, it's a good point bringing up here, right, is we have to really think like, when we're looking at 20%, 30%, whatever we're doing, health and safety wise, then what happens next year, what happens the year after that, you know, if we're going after a smaller number with that 20%, and we're leaving a really big number alone, you know, where's that put our water supply? That's the question, right?
On the health and safety, that's a statewide regulation based on statewide water supply, is that correct?
Yeah, it's associated with drinking water, yeah.
But it has nothing to do with what we have available in our reservoir.
Correct.
It's
It's
more
a
of
state mandate.
It's a state mandate as opposed to local. Does the board have any authority to appeal that? And for example, we've moved or not extended our irrigation city time to go through mid-October, basically for fire season.
So we didn't extend it though, we just moved it.
Yeah, we moved it, but
So you can definitely change your water usage. You should get permission. Obviously, you can't always get permission in the moment, but you also have to have a good reason if you're gonna do it. So obviously fire, if you're having a fire, that's definitely a good reason. And the state's likely not gonna, come down on you and fine you if you have a fire, because that's gonna be really bad publicity. But if you're doing it a lot and you're saying, I really need this water so we don't have a fire, that's not looked at as favorably. So when you're having an emergency, then you can probably get away with it. But if you're saying, I want to prevent an emergency, it's a little bit different the way the state looks at it. And it's very frustrating. I can totally see that. But we have to make sure that we are meeting the state mandates on how this water is being delineated out through our system. Now, I know that I've talked to both Adam and Robert and Alexis on. We want to make sure that the irrigation water is denoted differently than it was in the previous urban water management plan. It is not health and safety water, but it is safety to the community because of what it provides for fire protection. And it's also it's kind of we're trying to see if we can get it to fall within different categories of not being able to be cut because of the way we're utilizing it here upon the divide. So we are working with within the language that we have provided, but we're also narratorizing the language so that it's clear to the state that this is something that we're using to keep the community safe.
Thank you for addressing that.
Yeah, one thing I want to add is if the state comes back and requires some health and safety, that's a pretty dire situation, right? What they calculate that is basically use your population and they come up with some kind of gallons per person per day metric, usually about 55, to determine a health and safety number. If we got to that point, you know, we would probably be worse. You know, we would be in a very bad situation. We wouldn't even be contemplating agriculture or irrigation at that point. You know, that amount of water, pardon me, but 55 gallons times 10,000 people, that's not a lot of water. So I don't think we're ever gonna get to that point, barring a catastrophic, you know, interruption in supply.
Thank you.
The water reliability, we're touching on a lot of this going forward, kind of, you know, everything we've talked about kind of leads these last two, chapters here, kind of really builds to this point. You guys have already seen that by talking through these. So yeah, water reliability talks, is dry year scenarios, near term and long term. So drought risk assessment, this is, kind of what we're talking about now. Comparing our supplies and demands and how, you know, how we're going to, kind of figure that out. And I kind of want to touch on the long-term reliability, from the 2020 urban water management plan. This is how it was done, 2020, 2015, 2010. 1977 was the driest year that, the district saw. So the assumption was always put in 11,890 acre feet. It was the lowest April 2nd or second week of April, to start water season. So we always put, that's how it has been developed. You know, every year we can assume in the driest year, we're gonna assume on the second week of April, we're gonna have 12,000 acre feet in the reservoir. Right or wrong, that's the discussion we kind of want to have here. So we say that going forward, and I'll show you that next table from 2020. So that in mind, moving to our average year, when we look back since the stuff was built, our average capacity in the second week of April is 20,000, or a little over 20,000 acre feet. And their average demand is 9,000 acre feet. And then the last bullet there is 2050, 2026. I was able to track down all the inflow data into something. We have stumpy level data, but we don't have all the inflow data. These gauges are newer. They go in the stumpy. So the lowest in the last 11 years was 6,800 acre feet. So with all that being said, you go to the next table real quick. So this is how we kind of built it last time. You would assume single dry year, consecutive dry years after that, that's our storage level going into water season. Robert and I and Alexis had some discussions on this and how, you know, how to look, if we're looking at this correctly, I guess, if we're looking at this correctly the last 10 years. So this is obviously a lot of input from the public and board of how we want to approach this portion of it. But we were kind of thinking, you know, maybe we're looking at it the wrong way. Maybe we should look at, okay, our average year is 20,000 acre feet, and then we build our consecutive dry years after that, right? Going into the next year. So say if we are a single dry year would be an average year, and then we would say, okay, we have a 9,000 usage, only 7,000 inflow. So every year we drop a couple thousand acre feet year after year. That's a discussion I think kind of wanting to have here and see how we want to view that. Because it gives us a different look than this.
So the reason I like this, the way we've been doing it is, it does, give you this stark recollection that if we ever start out and we're at 11,000, we know we're in trouble. If we start above that, we may miss the ability that, all right, we may be in a dry year, but we may think we have extra water going on. So I don't know what the trigger level should be that consider, all right, we had a drought, but we have ample water. So it becomes the question of, we may be at 18,000 and then we figure we have ample water, we give 3,000 for water transfer, and the next year is the second dry year, like we saw it with the 2021, and there's no inflow, and then we go down even more. So that's the real question here. What's the level that should trigger our dry year? So should we keep it at the 11,000, or should it be maybe trigger based on when we had a drought, and then should we start the check mark there?
Yeah, but we're not having a water transfer like what we did that took us down more than what we actually were supposed to have given them. So we've got a little better handle on that kind of a situation now.
Any,
Yeah, so how I think about this, so the state is requiring us to look at a self-imposed 5-year, multi-year drought. So there's no crystal ball in this industry, unfortunately, or else none of us would be here. But going into the first year, we thought to ourselves, and this is still open for discussion, but let's going into that year, it would represent kind of an average year coming into the drought. So at year 1, we have some characterization of the supply available in Stumpy Meadows. And then we would self-impose that 5-year dry scenario where we're only looking at a minimal inflow into the reservoir. Of course, we know what's coming out. It's about 9,000 acre feet each year. And so when we really characterize, what do we think represents a 5 dry year scenario? How is the reservoir refilling? And so that's kind of the discussion I think that Adam is wanting to have a little bit. And so if it makes sense, I think to kind of enter into a kind of a 20,000 acre foot, that's kind of pretty typical over the historic time frame. And then we assess the 5-year drought from that point, right? Really looking at a constrained inflow into Stumpy, maintaining our 9,000 acre foot demand from the reservoir. If everything pencils out, we're good. Awesome. If it looks like that we need to maybe impose a 10 or 20% reduction based on our water storage contingency plan, this is the exercise that tells us. And then we can get into kind of prioritizing and stuff.
Is that based on a 6,800 inflow?
That's the open for discussion, right? So that's a pretty extreme situation. It's the lowest on record that and just so everyone knows, 1977 was the lowest.
Based on the 5 years, 9 out, 6, 8 in, that's would be a 9,000 at the end of 5 years.
Right, a net decrease exactly.
Yeah.
And which would put us at about that 11,000 if we came in during an
It would be
average.
11 off of 20, it would leave 9. 2,200 a year deficit for 5 years. So we'd be 2,000 below that.
Yeah, starting at 20.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think it may be useful discussion rather than looking at what the lowest year is to look at what the lowest 5-year community time, because I've lived in this county since 76, except for 10 years, and El Nino, it comes and goes. You can see it in the trees we cut for wood. If you look at the tree, you see the cycle of a few thick years and a bunch of thin. So I think when we're looking at a 5-year plan, we should consider looking, okay, what is a 5-year minimum that we've had over the last period we can measure, and that might be a better foundation rather than just looking at one critical year in 77.
I mean, there was 3 years, there was 2 years leading up to that. Really set the stage for that, so that's probably a good time frame to look at it. Then the 2014-15 drought was another 3 years.
That's right.
So would they tell us what years we have to look at? So we,
Oh, they do?
oh, absolutely. The whole regulation says you have to do the worst 1 year, the worst 3 years, and the worst 5 years. So you have to, they tell you what your, they say, look at these years, because these are what what are your worst years. And then you have to utilize those as those scenarios.
I think the difference is as we go up from 11,000, that's gonna impact when we start conserving. So that will start We may have a year where we're at 18,000 and we say it's not a normal water year. So that's basically what we're looking at there. So that's the best recommendation when a drought is triggered. So do you think we should be somewhere between 20,000 and 11,000, or this way it gives us room if we start having dry years and we're at 18 and we keep acting as if normal, and then we get to the point where year 3, we could be in trouble.
Yeah, I think the test is within the 5 years, so I think it's a proper assumption to go into the prescribed multi-year drought. Kind of just, under the average, and realizing that it's a pretty large data set, it offers a lot of variability within that average. And so I think personally, I would probably lean towards going in with some kind of informed average. If we want to bring it down a little bit to kind of reflect changing precipitation patterns, we could think about that and run that as well. But I think that the directive here is to, go into the multi-year drought, under an average year scenario in terms of storage.
To like say if you did have like that 18,000, like you're saying, that's already below, so you're already gonna likely be in some kind of reduction at that point.
Right.
As I recall, there's the longest we've had without a spill was 3 years.
It's that long.
I think there's a 3-year gap in the 70-day, but like since 2008, there's only been one, there was two years against spill in 14, 15, I'm trying to picture the table in my head.
21 didn't spill.
Yeah, so there's only, I think there's only been 11 times since it was constructed that it hasn't spilled. So that's
I think
that's numbers on the next side, right?
That's another context to look at.
Yeah, so I think the way we're going here, it pretty much is well informative, as we said, that anytime we are below 20,000, we start already going, okay, we're starting below our normal average, so we would already be putting some plans into place, so I think this is right.
But then we've kind of touched on this, already, the water source contingency plan. This is kind of what we do when we see those reduced supply levels, and and how the state sets it up is 10, 20, 30, 40, being greater than 50%. So if they're typically their drought declarations they make, that's what we saw in 2020, 21, and then 14, 15 as well. And we put a full list of some things there to think about. And obviously we talked about already, language to give us some delivery flexibility. And you go to the next slide to show you how.
Before we skip to that slide, so the top part where it says the required supply reduction scenario thresholds, it's very important that we match the state requirements, because this is our only guideline. They said if your urban water management plan matches those 6 stages, then we can use our urban water management plan and our water shortage contingency plan over any state mandates. So as long as we meet those and it's approved by the state, if the state says you need to reduce 30%, but our plan says 10%, we would be allowed to go at 10% reduction as opposed to 30. So that first part's important. Although we did fight when it did come to that point, and then they went back to the 2020 guidelines, but they're supposed to allow you to follow your own water storage contingency plan, because that's the whole purpose of this exercise, is to make sure you're able to have your own supply and meet your requirements.
And one of the other things, like what I was going through about taking a certain percentage off of potable water and a percentage off of, so if we're running 10%, and we take 10% off the potable water usage, and then look at 10% off of irrigation. At one point, I think we were talking about during the year of mosquito, of saying, okay, can we, which we didn't have in our current plan, was can there be voluntary reductions? Like if somebody has 40 inches, they're gonna talk about, okay, they'll take 20. I have 2, so I take 1 and voluntarily reduce it, but we still have water coming through our community. And it would be good to have that set up where we can have that option.
So typically, yeah, the earlier stages, so kind of how this works on kind of boots in the ground. So of course, there's the state requirement, we have to fit into the 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50, then greater than 50. Kind of how this works on the boots on the ground is the district annually assesses its supply capacity and its projected demands over a 12-year period. If we're looking at those and we're comparing those numbers and we're identifying a 10% mismatch, right? So we're showing a demand that exceeds our available supply by 10%. Then our options are, hey, go look at your water shortage contingency plan. Under the 10% scenario, there are a list of actions, and how these generally work, they're successive in nature. And in the early stages, they are kind of voluntary in nature typically, or they may be, you know, don't water your grass other than maybe 3 days a week. And then stage 2, stage 3, maybe it's 2 days a week, maybe 1 day a week. And so it's kind of like a, you know, it's a menu of options and actions that we can take under the various stages. Always looking at kind of our annual assessment when we're looking at the supplies, we're looking at the projected demands, we've quantified a deficit, and then we have the option here, you know, the slew of options really of actions that we can take to hopefully decrease the gap in supply.
That's what we didn't have before.
And I
That's
think
what we need to have in place this time.
something we have to be very careful about with a scenario like you're proposing is if it's a 10% and a 10% for a 20%, so you're saying 10 from treated and 10 from raw?
Well, that would be, however we get to it overall.
I just want you to understand,
Well, what I'm
that's,
saying is to have that option available.
Yeah.
Where before we had no option available or automatic, what?
There was an option,
We did not have that option because it was an automatic, we're cutting irrigation and moving
because
on.
we were at the 30% that time.
Okay, so it wasn't listed in the plan because that's what I went back and looked at.
But the one scenario is, I mean, that's the one thing we have to say, so if, someone does say, all right, I'm 40 inches, minus inches, and I'm going down to 20. The problem we have is we send the same water down, so the water cut on irrigation is probably not at the customer side, is it at the top end side? So I think that's the issue, we'll have to find out how we can get the voluntary changes to equal water coming down the canal. So that's the one thing we'll have to figure out.
Yeah, that's what they're gonna control of what's coming down the canal. And once it, you know, we change the orifices or whatever on people that wanna do that, then that's gonna make the numbers change.
Yeah, I'll just speak to that operation side. It would be a challenge because once you have to have a certain amount of head above each service, and if you're gonna have to keep that level regardless if they're taking it or not.
But
So, yeah,
ultimately, fire is what we wanna protect this community from.
no, I'm not, that's all I'm saying, I'm not
Yeah.
saying we don't like, I'm just saying the operation will be challenging. You could reduce the customer use through the orifice, but you may not reduce the amount of water coming down the canal. You could still, because you still have to have it at that level. So if you keep cutting the canal back, you won't be able to get some water through services at all. So then I don't know how you say, hey, you don't get any distribution services and setup isn't in the right spot, the right height along the canal to get your services. That's all I'm trying to say.
In looking at strategies, I think a couple things to look at is one is the snow load, the snow line. That over the last 2 decades, I think the snow line has risen, the amount of water that's in the Sierras for snowpack as a reservoir. And also look at this plan as a rationale to expand our storage capacities. That I think if we could show through this plan that there is the potential need to have backup water, that's a good thing to work in a collaboration with other agencies to increase the supply of water that we do have available.
Okay, back to it again. Are you,
Yeah, I said it.
So I remember several years ago as an irrigation customer calling in thinking I was very magnanimous offering to give up one of my 2 inches, and I was told the very same thing. And that's fine for you, but we have to keep a certain amount of head in the canal, or you know, if you're not taking it, we have to operate it. I just wondered if are there some technical solutions to that, maybe like weirs downstream of the orifices? I know the district's been kind of reluctant because it's another thing in the canal that you gotta use, but are there some tech, because, you know, in terms of fairness, it's right that everybody should take a hit, but if you're trying to serve gallons, if you're trying to save gallons and acre feet, irrigation and loss is where those numbers really are. So,
Yeah, so we definitely, we do that, we'll set weirs to back up water to make it work at a surface.
Okay.
That's definitely, there, you know, yeah, we could do, maybe not every service may not work, but that would be an option for price.
that was just one off the top of my head, but
And then what is the number that you're, of acre feet, you know, of inches sold? It's going to have an effect where your head is gonna be a problem. There should be a number that you know already,
Yeah.
that on this, all these different lines, you know, the minimum that has to go down those canals
Yeah.
to accommodate what you're trying to say.
I can say right now, what we've seen the last 2 years, we're approaching that, because we are already having problems, where we're having problems getting the right amount of water to services now, because our flows are so low.
And see, that's the kind of thing
We're
we need to
having
be
flows.
aware of when we're doing this cost of service also. Because if it's now affecting, what's coming down those lines, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
And that wasn't ever addressed in our cost of service.
That's some, I think we're really close to knowing that number, where we're at now.
Kind of scary.
Basically the capacity that you guys are running up against.
Yeah,
In terms
we're
of
getting-
higher inches and.
Yeah, we're
connections
getting to the point
to-
where the water savings is getting to the point where, we can actually run the canals lower.
Hmm.
When you run the canals lower, you can't feed the services to their required allotment. And we do, during off season, we do change those, but we're working on changing them so we can serve them at a lower level in the canal. But not every, you can't do that every single location. That is how the canal's constructed. So, yeah, you go to the next one, is kind of how we did it in 25 or 20. That's just our percent, so for the summer talked about earlier, you know, we started at 18,000 feet, you can see we'd already be at this shorter development of one. Going to the start of the year, second of the last slide is kind of what is setting up discussion points. We've been talking a lot about it already. It's been a lot of what we kind of saw coming, and other items you guys have already have brought up, but, you know, like project development, talking about water reliability, different other storage. Our drought risk assessment now is talking about reservoir levels going into a single year, multi-year drought, and then the contingency methodology, talking about our options if we're in those various shortage reduction levels. Board directors, anything else that sure someone can think of. More head for everyone.
So just to add on with the water reliability and project development, about 2 board meetings ago, I added the, what the GPUD's water vulnerability assessment was that we put into the watershed plan. And each one of those vulnerabilities has a project to it, so there's the hydroelectric, project, the increasing stumpy meadows, treated lines, the Ford siphon, so all of those are kind of built into our projects. The one thing we didn't add was, I did add on the side of making sure that SAFER is funded, because those are the things that funds are like those municipal service corporations, in case we have to annex those in, so that's kind of built in. And the only thing we should consider with water that I didn't add in there directly was wooden flumes. So that's something that can impact us down the lines in case there's a fire, so we should consider a wooden flume kind of in the water reliability assessment. Any public have any input or questions? I know we have some irrigation users there that had to go through it. If you guys have any ideas on what can be done. And if so, it doesn't have to be today, but just think about that as we go through, because usually when it comes to the point of when we're below 20-30%, then, you know, we're kind of in dire situations, but we're usually on the state mandated end. We usually have the rare ability of those of us up north are usually water rich. So that's our biggest resource. We just don't have the connections per infrastructure to keep everything going. So that's our biggest problem. We don't have enough customers to meet all of the reservoirs, dams, treatment canals, the ditches, the stuff that you Forest Service is doing. So now we have to do mountains and trees and vegetations and all of that. So those are the things we have to consider when we do look at our water reliability. Any other comments from directors? And I know Don is gonna keep us very honest and keep the irrigation customers afloat there. And one of the big things that I'm looking forward to is when we do increase our hydro, there is a portion of our hydro revenues that does go back to irrigation. So my hope is we can see actually a reduction from those minor inches and bring us back down to where we were before a lot of the cluster services. So I think that may help on then with the capacity to be able to cover that.
Yeah, and that's a big concern, which I didn't realize what we should have looked at when we were doing Dakota is what are we doing now? We're putting our canals at risk by increasing the cost. Well, we're losing customers, which are just the flow coming in and out. And that wasn't in that statistical thing we did, and wasn't addressed. And that kind of doesn't make me warm and fuzzy right now.
Yeah, it was built in what happens when the customers go down, but it wasn't really built in what happens to operations. And that was one thing we need to look at. Director Stone?
If I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, as far as the percentage of use of raw water, irrigation uses about 3/4 of the raw water that comes down the canal, and treated goes about 25%.
About 70-30.
70-30. Okay, so when we look at the generation of income from raw water, either through transfer or whatever we can do from the cost of service plan, does that mean that 70% of the savings or revenue would go to irrigation customers, because that's the percentage of who uses what water? Specifically through, generation of electricity.
And I just want to address the previous comment from Director Seaman. This isn't something that's typically considered in a cost of service because it's a temporary situation. When you are doing
Temporary.
the water shortage contingency plan, this isn't something that happens for like a long period of time.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when we did the cost of service. There's a give of when the water coming down that canal is affected by our loss of minor inches that are being taken. And that wasn't taken into account basically because we were only doing a statistical number thing where we were not really doing necessarily all real world problems, situations, etc. When it comes to our system, which then makes me concerned that if we're having to push enough head down those canals to support the plants, well, what else do we need to do? Because it's more than just the treatment plants.
If I understand your concern correctly, you're concerned with when we're in a stage, a different than normal stage. So when we're at a reduction stage, am I correct?
No, I'm talking about as we're looking at reduced numbers of minors inches. I'm looking beyond right here, which I'm sorry is, I guess, a little bit off, but it's not off. Don't shake your head. Because if we keep reducing the number of minors inches being taken by irrigation, and at what Adam sort of inferred, that we're at a point where it's starting to be a concern that we have to have so many minor inches to keep that head in that canal going. We need to have another look at selling that water, or getting something out of it, to keep that head coming down that canal.
I think the comment that Adam made, and I'll just maybe try to clarify what he was saying is when you go into reducing the water that's coming down the canals by these water shortage contingency plan metrics, these like say you're in stage 2
Yes.
or 3, that's when we have hard times providing water to those customers. Because we have to reduce the amount of water that's in the canal, so we can't physically provide water. So and what I was trying to state was that's a temporary issue. You're not going into a multi-year water shortage contingency plan unless you have a large multi-year drought, or say you have a, God forbid, Stumpy Meadows Dam fails. We don't ever want to have that happen, but if that happens, those are the types of things that these water shortage contingency plans are used for. But for the 90% of the time that this is going to be implemented, it's a very temporary situation. It's once you get back to a normal situation, once you get back to having enough water. And so that wouldn't constitute the need to change the amount of water that's flowing in those canals in the same way that Adam was referring to. And so you made the comment about the cost of service. I just want to make sure, like, you don't really look at like an, oh my gosh, emergency and a cost of service. It's a long-term look, much like this is, but I hate to say it, the second day that this is done, it's wrong. Because all models are wrong. Some are wronger than others, and some are righter than others. We want to get as right as we possibly can, but you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to guess right for the whole 5 years moving forward. Just like on the cost of service, or just like in this, we're doing the best we can with the data. So we want to make sure that, I just want to make sure that that's not like the thought process of, we didn't think about this in the cost of service, because those are two different like reports that we have to come up with.
Yeah, if I can add something that'll help clarify and get everybody on the same page with this, I think what Director Seaman is looking at is if we can add in the urban water management plan, what is the level of raw water we need to put down the canal based on the minors inches that we have, and based on what's a critical mass of when we get below this number of minors inches that we're selling, that we have a problem with being able to put water down. And I think that kind of adds a situation where, all right, we started at 640 minor inches we used to sell for irrigation. We're down to 480. What happens if it goes to 400? Does that put a critical impact on our system where we can't function? And then that's a cost benefit ratio where we may have to reduce to keep it above that level, even though it may not be cost of service, but it's to allow service to continue. So I think that's what Director Seaman is looking at.
That is what I
Sure,
said,
sure.
even
Yes.
though yours is coming out of a different voice.
Mhm.
But also the thing is too, that's what we ran into at that meeting, to decide, are we gonna keep, irrigation going at that meeting that mosquito lit up? And that was what we were hoping, we were running kind of scared on that one because we were going against what the state wanted. But reality is, we did talk about reducing, if people voluntarily wanted to reduce, could they voluntarily reduce? And at that point, the urban water management plan would not allow us to do that. And that's what we wanted to make sure went into flexibility on how to say, okay, we're at the end of the season, we've been mandated. How can we accomplish what the state wants without just saying, we're gonna keep our irrigation going for the protection of our area. And that's what's kind of important to, I know, the board that was on there. And I think that was a big importance to the customer base, because we were worried about having water coming down those canals in case. And, you know, I understand you weren't involved.
Oh, yeah, I was saying that so I could see you, because I couldn't see it on the line.
Like, wait a minute. Okay, now-
It wasn't meant to be rude at all.
Jump up here.
Yeah,
now.
go ahead.
But I guess that's something if added consultant can look at is, before in our urban water management plan, irrigation was defined by weeks. So the ability for us to control irrigation was full is how many weeks, and then each percentage decreased the amount of weeks that irrigation was. And I guess the one thing we're looking is, can that be fine-tuned and dialed is, depending on the miner's interest taken, can we reduce the amount coming down the canal?
Yeah.
Where that's what we're looking at, is there a
Yeah,
percentage we
still
can do
accomplish those reductions.
versus weeks?
Yeah.
So I can't believe I'm gonna put this on the record, but I am gonna put this on the record so that everybody in the room can hear it. And then I guess for our
Do I need
community,
to get on the bench?
hopefully the state doesn't listen to this recording. The narration that I'm asking them to put in, the words are kind of we're gonna do what we have to do, and we're gonna ask for forgiveness later.
That's kind of what we did do.
It's basically exactly what we did do. You guys made the decision. This is before I got here. I commend you all as a board for making the decision you made, because it was not an easy decision, because you were facing down $10,000 per day fines. And you said, hey, we don't care. We're gonna do this to protect our community. And so the narration that I've asked Adam and Alexis and Robert to kind of come up with is, hey, we understand that we have this much water. When it becomes a water shortage issue, we are going to comply to a point. When we see that there is an issue, when we see that there's an emergency directly on the horizon, or if emergency erupts, we are going to do, well, you have to be really careful with potential.
Well, but it
Because-
was a potential, because we were in the first week of September. Because that was when our regular
Sure.
meeting was back then, and we made the conscious choice that, we were gonna protect our community, because our irrigation was gonna run another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, till October 1st. And we figured whatever was gonna go down was not, as it was the best decision we could have made. But who in the heck would have known that? The crystal ball was.
Yeah, it was 120 degrees and we're like, we gotta keep it going.
No, 100%. What I just want to really be careful with what I'm saying. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it based on a potential situation, but you have to be able to look at what's going on, and you have to be able to look and see. Obviously, you said crystal ball. Totally, you guys were in tune with nature and what was happening,
And then
which was
5
amazing.
o'clock, boom.
Which was amazing. You do have to be careful, because when you say, when you look at the state and you thumb your nose at the state, and you say, I'm gonna do it anyway, based on potential, and then something doesn't happen, is when you start to come into issues, because you're coming head on with a bull. And we're like not a bull, according to the state. So we just have to be really careful to have good backup, good examples, and like, hey, we're just doing this to benefit the safety of our community. And so, you know, how you explain this and how you tell the state you're doing this is very, very important, so that we can have the same model that you're hoping for. And I hope I know I took what happened in 2022 with the original urban water management plan, and I looked at Adam, I looked at Robert, and I said, we're not doing that again. We're not having the question marks of, can we do this? We're having whether you like it or not, we're gonna be able to do this.
Well, and the one thing, when we did make that decision, it was our numbers of water coming in, or that were at the level of Stumpy, was not at that critical
Yeah.
number.
Correct.
And that was the whole thing we addressed, is that
Sure.
we were at a safe level by the end, or almost the end of the season. So that's why we could consciously make that decision, where if we were down at 11,000 or something, can't remember what the heck we were, but we were getting kind of low.
And we sent direct queries to the State Water Resource Control.
And they ignored us.
DWR, and we got nothing back,
So
so we
we
were,
tried.
we were in a bad spot then.
Yeah.
I know Director McDonald has questions, so
Yeah.
let's.
I think Nichols can answer. I wanted to check with Brendan Seaman and you just to clarify, because you eat, breathe this irrigation topic, as far as.
And Robert,
And Robert, hey, Rob.
Robert's the irrigation guy with me.
Yeah, so from what I'm gathering is people could self-impose restrictions and the complications and the intricacies of trying to manage the water with the head and the volume or just 10 or 20% cuts. What you do is limit the irrigation season. It's to reduce instead of trying to tweak the amount of the canals, is right?
No, we were trying to figure a way to reduce the amount of water usage, but the same amount of water was coming down the canals. Because you want that water coming down those canals, because the what if a fire hits, you want the ponds full around here. You want water in those canals that those firemen can go in and pull out of that canal or out of those ponds. You want all that available still. So there was multiple, I think, people that were pulling, that were getting irrigation, that was the thought in their mind also is, okay, let's not take the full amount. If, say, September 1st, we're running into a question area that we have to do a reduction. We do a reduction. Can we do it? Can we do our self-imposed reduction? And that's what we were originally talking about. And that's what we were talking about basically in, when we were at that meeting. You were there.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where we had to do something, but we didn't really, in that urban water management plan, have options. So we had to look at the numbers we had coming in stumpy, and we tried to get permission and they didn't respond, so game on.
Okay. Yeah, okay, thanks for calling.
You guys are touching base on something that I see often, and that is the state's attempt to solve the problem with one tool, okay? And what
Thank you.
works in the valley does not work up in the rural hills like this. A great example is the urban water use objectives where they're limiting outdoor water use. Well, I live up in the foothills myself, I take that as like a risk to, a fire potential risk, right? So where I used to have a beautiful lawn, right, they're asking me to reduce my water use, that doesn't really comport with the rural community. So I think what you guys are touching base on is really the state's attempt to fix the major problems they were facing in 2022 with the hatchet and not really carve out any, and kind of take the individual approach, which you guys ultimately, took the individual approach, so.
Right, and I worked in the, in Sonoma and Solano counties, and I watched, during multiple droughts in those areas, where they shut down parks. I mean, parks did not have grass. They did not have grass in any of the, golf courses, it was hit,
Did you say Solano County?
yeah. But, or anyway, that was the kind of thing is that I saw parks where they stopped irrigating the park. So that's why I was concerned when you said the parks had to be kept green, and I was thinking,
Some do, it depends.
no,
It's,
that's not true.
well,
literally.
some do, and basically what you do is you start to reduce, like he was saying, water days for your lawn. Or you go to odd days, even days, whatever it is you decide. But when you have a recreation district that's also a government agency, if you're really careful how you regulate them. Based on their water use, and they will come back and they will fight and they will say to the state board as well. That these are a community benefit, and I understand what you're saying, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just think we have to be very, very careful because we can be hit on all different sides from different people. Golf courses, sure, you're gonna, hey, you can water it one day every 2 weeks or whatever, just to keep it basically alive. But there's a lot of things that we can't do, unless we're told that we can do it.
No, I understand, because like I said, I work for different agencies and I do know that they set them up.
It was non-functional turf. So you couldn't use treated water to irrigate the parks. If
Right,
you're
and that's
after
what I'm saying,
irrigation.
so, we're looking at the 58, acre feet that is. I'm assuming parks and your golf courses, so if we reduce that, then, or however we reduce it. Then we want that option to be able to cut that too,
Yeah, so the,
and just think about how much money we save in chemicals and stuff.
yeah, so we had, it was kind of in, like, what they're talking about the different days, that was in
Right.
that original plan, saying, depending on the water shortage. Of level, if you, whatever days you watered, that would apply to customer class like that,
Yeah, but I don't think we even had that option
it's in there.
in that plan.
And then our plan, does it have the golf course specifically mentioned in it in the previous one?
I don't think they're golf courses, we don't call it golf courses, we call it as landscape.
It's like-
Yeah, and that's the other thing to think of. Anybody here from ALT? Here, I know we have a couple of people, so, that's the one thing that we're thinking of putting in the CIP is to add a recycling, treatment plant to the, leach field and over there, so you can have recycled water for the golf course, and that'll also help reduce the treated water that's going there and also help in case of a drought. So those are some of the things to think of. I know we have some people online. Is there any questions or comments from anybody online? Okay, seeing none.
Just curious about the golf course. I don't use it, but it's an HOA. Could they possibly sue the district for cutting off the water?
We would be told by the state, so we would just say, we go deal with the state, because we couldn't do anything about it. we would be mandated, just like everybody else. I mean, theoretically, could you? Yes.
Actually, we control all that over there anyway, because we're the permit holder.
But she's talking about the treated water that we send to the golf course.
The WDR doesn't have anything to do with potable, non-potable, just the wastewater.
Yeah, so she's asking if we cut the treated water off to the golf course, could they sue us? I mean, I'm not gonna tell you yes or no, but
Who cares?
do anything you want.
It's an amenity that we all pay dues for, so it seems like it would cost money to replace all the dead grass when we got the water back. Just curious.
But that would probably be a situation where if we were following our water shortage contingency plan, that would be a situation of we have to cut back so we have water to drink and bathe with for the next 2 years, or do you want to be able to golf and have water for 1 year? So that would probably be the choice we would be facing if we did cut it. So we would be at a serious situation.
I think at that point, they'd be happy to not water the.
I hope so. There may be some diehard golfers.
It's a pretty dire situation for sure.
Director.
Yeah, I was gonna say, talking about parks, kind of near and dear to me, because I was in parks management when the non-functional turf laws
Yeah.
came into effect and so forth. I would say probably if we want parks to be part of this plan in any tangible reduction way, the time to start talking to them is now, not the day that we need to start on them back. Because the ways that a park would look at saving water would be not turning off water to playable fields, but the fringes, all of the extra. There's new types of grass, grant programs for putting in, we cut up to 50% of our water in by changing the types of grass we had. So probably a conversation to be had now.
So that's a conversation I think that the parks are involved in already at this level. And when I say, we wouldn't, so when Alexis is correct, the term is non-functional turf. A soccer field, a football field, a baseball field, those are not considered non-functional.
Yeah.
Those are what I was talking about when I mentioned the health and safety factor, because those are, I remember in 2015, we were like in the same vein, and we were like, well, you're gonna turn off the water to all the parks, what are kids gonna go out and do? Like, you're gonna have a lot of problems, and the state was like, yeah, okay, let's turn it off to all the areas where they don't need to use it, like all the, like you said, the fringe areas, the out of the way areas. But let's make sure we keep kids involved in activities and stuff so that they're not doing wrong things, but we all can conserve in other areas as well. And that's where they started hitting homeowners for their lawns, because, we always had a statement, if you only step on your lawn to mow it, do you really need it?
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
You're gone now.
So those were the type, it's as opposed to going after a park, I'd rather go after a home that just has a decorative lawn. And not a useful park. So I guess that's what I was trying to say. Maybe I didn't say that earlier, Miss Director Seaman, earlier. I wanna make sure.
Stand up.
Hold on. I just wanna make sure that was what I was trying to say when I said like the health and safety aspect of parks is. There's a kind of you look at different areas when you're looking at conservation. And I'm gonna tell you, I'll kind of second what Robert was saying. If you're in a health and safety emergency, you don't have irrigation water at your home. You don't have golf course water, you don't have park water, you have water to run your toilet, to run your shower, to cook your food. You are given a stipend of water. If you are to that level, you don't have raw water, you don't have agricultural water, you don't have any water. You have the least amount of water. And that only happens when you are like the dam fails, or you are literally, you've had 3 years of no rain and we have 5,000 acre feet in the reservoir. So those are such dire situations that you definitely have to understand them and look at them and figure them out. But they're not situations that are gonna happen on an every year basis. So they're very, like I said, temporary. Hopefully, the next year comes. California is a 7-year cycle. You have 7 dry years and you have really 3 wet years. 7 dry years, 3 wet years. And so those are the types, you just hope that the one next year is a wet year, but when you're considered health and safety, you are really, really hurting. Everybody's turning over.
Don't get the water cup.
I will be the water cop. I've already been told by the board that when we have a drought emergency and we're in level 5, this is gonna be a little footnote, that I get a badge and a gun and I get to go to people's houses who are watering and I get to turn it off for them. No, just kidding, totally kidding. But yeah, you would actually get code enforcement
Did
involved.
that in Santa Rosa.
Yeah, no, we did too, we had the police, sheriff would go, code enforcement, it was pretty crazy in 2015 with all the regulations. We had to do a 35% cut down by us in the desert, so I don't know what it was up here. 30.
I have one question. I know we have to do the best practices for commercial. Does that have to be in the urban water management plan at all, or that's just a separate thing?
That's a separate thing, that's, annually, the requirement to report is an annual time step for the urban water use objectives.
So one thing I would consider, especially when we're dealing with drought and water shortage contingency plan is in future, we're gonna have a car wash right near here, so just think about water savers with that.
So all car washes are regulated so heavily that every drop of water has to be reused, and they are probably the most water efficient use of water in the entire state of California.
Yeah, they're all big recycled
Yeah,
unit.
they have to be one, basically the whole underneath is a big bath and it recycles the water, and they can only use a certain amount of water. So I understand your concern, but really those are not your concerns. The concern is people washing their car at their house. So what you actually tell them to do is stop washing your car at home and go to the car wash that's down the street.
We'll be there. All right, any other questions? I think we hit this, and when's the next time we'll be discussing this again?
We're gonna bring back probably a draft in May. We're talking about May 13th. It'll be the draft and the public hearing. So everyone, we welcome you all to come and be here for that discussion, because that's going to be where you'll actually get to read the plan. And I asked that the plan is probably ready by the end of April, so that we can at least send it out to the board and have it posted as a draft so people can start to review it. I don't know exactly what date. I don't want to hold to a specific date, but we're gonna try to get out as early as we can so the board can review and the public can review as well.
And I would ask if we could make sure to invite the recreation district, at least representatives from them, and at least let the schools know if they have any concerns and any of the commercial ones.
So it'll be a public hearing, so it'll be noticed like every other public hearing. But we can.
But I was reach out to them specifically.
That one will be up at the regular board chambers, or it will be.
We could do it wherever you like to do it. We're gonna do it with a typical board meeting, so it's kind of the public hearing at a typical board meeting. I will take your direction as a board as to where you'd like to hold it, so we're open.
Okay.
May 13th is an actual date for that hearing.
That's our next board, that's a May board meeting, so yes.
Yeah, and that is is that when you're gonna have the public meeting for that?
It'll be a public hearing that day is what we're proposing, yes.
Okay. I'd like to be involved in making sure that it gets advertised, so we get people to show up for the public hearing, that, stand up and say that, I'm looking around and I'm grateful that all these people are here, but there was not much advertisement for this particular hearing. I didn't catch it that it was happening until recent board meetings, and then there are issues with getting things out to the public. I think that the public needs to be informed about what's going on, or at least have an opportunity. And I had some emails that I exchanged with a couple of people about getting notices out. You know, this is a difficult environment to get notices out to people. I get that. It's a rural area. I'm used to that. But
I will ask you, Taylor will be in charge of kind of setting that up. So we don't really put out flyers or anything for that.
yeah,
We do have public hearings that it'll be posted, noticed like that, and you're welcome to, we would love to have the help.
yes.
I will say, and I wanted to take this the wrong way because we do have a very small community. But even when we were doing like the cost of service analysis and we did 18 meetings, the most people we received at a meeting was 15.
Well,
So, and we advertised those like absolute wildfire everywhere we possibly could, posted them, because we had to, posted them all around town. And we still, and like I said, please don't take this the wrong way, because I don't want you to think that we don't want to advertise. But this is typical of the people that we get. So we get a few, but we don't get much more than this. Even when we did the water transfer 24, I think we had 13 people. I think Mitch would probably remember because he was my CAD counter.
so I remember the meetings that were
Covered lives.
happening in 2017, 2018.
Those were
and
very
those meetings
controversial.
were packed.
Controversial meetings.
That's good.
Controversial.
Those were
The rates
super
were
controversial.
going up 300%,
Yeah.
but, it will be addressed, so just know that advertising, there has been a problem and it will be addressed before the next.
Yeah, but we would be happy to work with you and however we can help you, we can provide resources. If you want to post flyers, we are welcome to post flyers. Yeah, we would welcome that.
Yeah.
And now that you're on that irrigation committee, you are technically an employee of us, even though you get the high salary of $0.
And, yeah. Yes, I'm being paid so much, yes.
Okay,
Jefferson, I just wanted to say that, I'm complete in agreement with you. In previous times, there was higher turnouts, and I didn't think that was enough. But I keep being told, if you're doing your job.
Yeah.
People, okay, but if there's problems, that's when people show up. So we'd like to think that we're being transparent and straightforward and honest. So it's like, if this place was packed, we'd think, uh-oh. Right, so, but we get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just, there's also a statutory requirement regarding the notice. It pretty much follows the Brown Act. There'll be a once a week in a newspaper published, at least for 2 consecutive weeks, that kind of thing. So there is a statutory requirement for the public involvement, the public hearing, and the adoption and everything, so.
And then there's a 45-day comment period. So if I think it's 45 days,
No, there's no requirement on comment periods. It's up to the board, you guys.
but there is a comment period. So when you do start saying a notice, we will receive comments and if you don't have to show up to the meeting, we will read comments out, do all that kind of stuff.
and please come to the next meetings, we'll discuss whether we want to do a evening meeting for the public hearing, so we could get more public, or doing at the regular board meeting, so that'll be a good discussion as well, because we know most people work, who wants to come at 2 or 10 o'clock or whenever we hold them. So.
And that one we had in 2017, 2018, it was in the evening, all of them that I went through, because I know there was multiple ones here and the place was kind of packed.
Yep. Okay. any
I
other-
have a question and I don't see a button to raise my hand, so I do have a question.
Yep.
So I've been up here since 77. Is there any possibility that at any time you might want to have a meeting, maybe use the Bailey House, come down to this end of your business? and maybe move the meeting to 7 o'clock. You got a lot of people coming through the canyon at 5:30, just getting home at 6. 7 PM might be a better time. You might get more attendance, more people have been home, able to grab the wife wherever. Just a consideration.
All right, we'll reach out to the Conservancy District, because that's where their meetings are, so we'll see if we can have a meeting over there. Thank you. Any other comments on this? Okay, that brings us to our next item, the discussion of potential water trend.
So, kind of a little history about water transfer. Back in 2020, the district, this was before my time. I will caveat that a lot of times, so there was a water transfer here. We sold approximately 2,000 acre feet of water to the Westlands Water District. That 2,000 acre feet netted the district about $660,000 in additional revenue to the district. There was some issues that went on with what we are gonna affectionately call the refill agreement. It was not conveyed by previous staff members in the correct ways that I think it should have been conveyed. We as a district don't have much say in what goes into a refill agreement. We can ask, we can make amendments. However, we are a little bit at the mercy of the Bureau of Reclamation in Folsom Lake. So we do the best. We are actually working with Washington DC Bureau of Reclamation because they're a little bit more amicable to the changes that we're proposing as opposed to Folsom Lake Regional Bureau of Reclamation. So I'm gonna go through a few slides. I'm gonna go through some stats and some facts, and then we're gonna talk about what this could mean for the district and what you know. There's a lot of misconceptions because of the last time this happened that water transfers are bad and that you're losing your water forever. And I just want to make sure that I can answer any questions and kind of go through the stats. So go ahead and give you the next slide. I'm just gonna keep on going because we already know all this. So obviously we're aware that Stubby Meadows is our reservoir. We have about 21,000 acre feet of water. We started spilling February 4th. Sorry, I was looking at Adam and he gave me the head nod, so I know that I'm right. February 4th, and we are still spilling. We typically spill, like the earliest I think we've not spilled was the end of April, maybe early May, since I've been here. And then the latest we've spilled was July, since I've been here. Typically it's somewhere in the middle, that's the average, May or June. We usually use that water to kind of do our startup for irrigation. And we use that to kind of continue to make sure that people have enough water throughout the divide. We have other water rights that are not stored in Stumpy that are called side water affectionately or appropriative rights. So we can take that water 9 months out of the year. We are not allowed to take it July, August, and September. So I'll tell you, I don't know if you go to the board meetings, you saw this, we had a major canal blowout around Christmas time. We literally had no water coming, ability to bring water from Stumpy into our treatment plants. And it wasn't even a big issue because we had enough side water at the time, enough appropriative rights, so we could still keep running the water treatment plants and providing enough water for the district communities, just utilizing that side water. So we do have a lot of extra resources and extra supplies throughout the district, right? So here's kind of an inflow of how much water comes into Stumpy. So now you know it's 21,000 acre feet. If you look at this is the 9-year average, we average about 27,000 acre feet of water coming into Stumpy. We don't ever take Stumpy down to zero. The lowest since I've been here, and it was the first year, and it was the year of the mosquito fire. It was 13,500, I believe, is how low it got. And then ever since then, the lowest it's got, and I'm gonna give Adam a bunch of kudos, but don't let him his head get too big. He's really done a great job of kind of tightening the system up, doing a lot of canal lining, canal piping, and being very water efficient. So he's got his guys out there turning dials so that we're only sending the right amount of waters down. And the lowest it's gotten, I think, is 17,000 in the last 4 years, 3 years, since 2023.
Yeah.
So it's been great. So you can do the math there. We're really only working through about 4,000 acre feet of water. So really tight, really efficient, really doing what we need to do. Go ahead. This is a really confusing graph, but I'm gonna explain it to you in kind of layman's terms. So this is what a typical year would look like as we have storage. So basically, a water year in California is October 1st to September 30th. So we don't actually, it's not calendar year, it's not fiscal year, it's a weird, they do it October to September. The percentage of exceedance is how many times, how much will we exceed the amount of water that we're using, basically. It's probably better if we go to the next slide, because it's gonna be a little bit easier to go one more. So this is what I wanna kind of talk about. 95, what's this saying is 95% of the time, we will still fill and spill with the amount of water that we come in. 10% of the time, we will not. And this is with the transfer and without a transfer. So what we're proposing is a potential 3,000 acre foot transfer. So what that does is it puts what we call affectionately a hole within the reservoir. It's not actual physical water. We do release physical water, but the next year, when the water comes back in from the natural flow, we capture that 3,000 acre feet of water. So it's held in our reservoir, but it's kind of like shadow water. We can't really rely on it. We can't really use it until there's a few metrics that are met. The two metrics that we're working on, and this is kind of where I was talking about earlier, the negotiations that we're doing with the Bureau. To clear is what we call it, clear that 3,000 acre foot hole, you have to have Folsom operating within a flood control stage. So anytime you drive by the flood control dam and Folsom and you see it flowing water over the top, that's being operated in a flood control stage. The other metric is the delta is in excess. And so there are gauges where you can look at this online. So this is not something that's a secret. This is all stuff that has to be posted by the government. The thing that we are trying to change is right now it's an and. It's this and this. So Folsom and the delta has to be there. We are trying to change that to an or. And the reason why we're trying to change that to an or is because in 2021, when we had an issue with the last water transfer, Folsom was not being operated in a historically driven fashion. It had been operated in a fashion to allow Shasta Lake to fill higher than it has ever. So they were running more water through Folsom Dam than they normally would in a typical year. So basically what they were doing was they were doing abnormal operations. And so we are using that as our basis for changing the and to an or, because if you decide how you want to operate your reservoirs, then we need to have some flexibility as to how we clear this hole within our reservoir. We're getting there, and we have some big gorillas on our side. So we have EID, we have PCWA on our side helping us with that fight. So, you know, there are partners in that fight, but there also are enemies in other areas. So good to have them in the room when they're on our side, not always good to fight against them. Go to the next one. So here's kind of the issues with the delta that we're seeing is we may or may not be able to do a transfer. We are at the mercy of what they call the pumps at the Clifton Port Forebay. So there's the Banks plant and the. Anyone help me?
Party Banks.
Good. Sorry, I really have a brain fart. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. One is a federal facility. Jones and Banks, sorry, there you go, thank you. One is a federal facility and one is a state facility. So those pumps are what send the water down the line. One goes down the 99 and one goes down the 5. The 99 is federal water, the 5 is state water. Now, that's kind of a misnomer. It's operated and owned, those systems are operated and owned by the feds of the state. The potential trade partner that we have is Westlands again. And they are a federal contractor, so they are a Central Valley Project contractor, but they utilize the State Water Project to convey their water. So our job in a water transfer is to get the water to Folsom Lake. Once it gets to Folsom Lake, our hands are washed, save for the hole that we put in the reservoir. It is their responsibility to take the water from Folsom Lake into the various conveyance systems and into their service area. So they have to pay all along the way and do leave water or leave payments along the way to make sure that they can gather the water that we're selling them. Go ahead. So here's what we're seeing is we have this purchaser, Westlands Water District. And I'm saying up to 3,000 acre feet, and I'll explain that in 1 minute. We have seen typical transfers right now we're in a dry year. We are verging, there's 5 different kind of water years. You have wet, you have above normal, you have below normal, you have dry and critically dry. So 2015, when we had all the state mandates, that was considered a critically dry year. Those are the multiple year droughts. Those are where you're having, when we didn't fill or spill, those are considered critically dry years. Right now, we're teetering between dry and below normal. I think, are we technically dry right now? Anybody know? I think we're technically dry. But if we get storms, then we are like right, it's really, really close. They just increased the federal allocation from 15% to 20%. So that means that Westlands gets a little bit more water, but they still can't fulfill all their contracts. The amount of water that they need every year, they do not have rights to is 600,000 acre feet of water. So basically every year they're looking for an additional 600,000 acre feet of water. On a typical year, when they're buying water, they buy about 70,000 acre feet. I spoke with them this morning. I had a meeting before I was even out of my house. It was about 6:30 this morning that I was working for you all, trying to make sure see what was gonna happen. Basically what they're looking for is they have some calls. They're called for, they do a similar system to what we do with their irrigation applications. So they do applications, people have to submit in how much they want. And theirs are due on Monday. And they are going to then go through all of the different applications and see how much water is still needed. They will then let us know, hey, yay or nay, we want water from you. Now, at that point, we start to set the price. 2 years ago, we were offered $275 an acre foot, which in my opinion is very low. If you're in a below normal year, I would say, let's do it because you have water to spare and you're flowing water through the reservoir more than you would have. When you're teetering on below normal and dry, my want for this district is to get more than 300 and probably more than 350 for our water. If we can do it. So that's where the up to 1.2 comes. Now, so sorry, I have like a frog in my throat all of a sudden. We, as a board, and it's not, when I say we, it's a collective we, I do what they tell me to do. But we could make the decision to not trade a full 3,000 acre foot this year and save some for a potential next year. If we had the crystal ball again, and I'm gonna look to Director Seaman because she seems to have one somewhere. You're gonna bring it next time. Please do. She seems to have a crystal ball and know what the next year is going to look like for the next few months. So we could either make the decision to transfer the whole 3,000 in the hopes that we get a big wet year the next year, or we could maybe split this in half and transfer 1,500 one year and 1,500 the next year. We've done a lot of hydrologic analysis through a process called the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program that says we can do a 3,000 acre foot transfer every 2 to 3 years based on natural hydraulics. So like I was saying earlier with that one graph, we have a 95% chance of getting more water into our reservoir than we use. So there's a very small chance that this could be another dry year or we don't fill much like we did in 21. Nobody has that crystal ball. And if somebody does, boy, oh boy, bring it over here because I want to make some investments with you. But really, really, this is a very safe watershed. And like Adam said, the reservoir was built in 64, right? 11 times in 64 years, in 62 years, excuse me, have we not filled. That's really, really good. I can definitely say that that's probably one of the highest percentages in the entire state of California of filling and spilling every year. You heard in 2015, they literally put out reservoir maps all over where they're all like 10, 15, 20, 25%. And everybody was like going crazy because all these reservoirs were really low. And I've looked back up here, this one was almost full every year during that drought period. It was 5-year drought and it was full almost every year. So really, is this a risk? Everything we do is a risk, but the benefits could be huge for the district. So what do we do with revenue of up to $1.2 million? There's a lot of different things that we could do with that if we make a water transfer. We could put that money into building infrastructure. We talked about some of the things that we're doing with pipelines and canal linings to make the system even more efficient. And then what Robert said is we take that water and we have additional water available to transfer that's not even touching the reservoir water that we have. So those are things that we're working on right now. We could also take that water and use it as rate stabilization money. So say maybe some of it we take and put it in the general fund. And we use it so that the next rate increase isn't as large. That's always the thing that I want to do. I've told the board this and I commend them because they just gave me the ability to go after a feasibility study to build a second and possibly a third reservoir within the district. They're not going to be big ones. They're going to be a little bit smaller than Stumpy, but they're still going to be a lot. They're going to allow us to do and be more flexible. And what that means is, if we can utilize the resources, we are resource rich. We are funding poor. We are financially poor. And I don't say that that sounds poor, but we're not poor by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't want you as customers to bear the burden of everything that we do here. I would like to send and make other people pay for your rates. Let's make Westlands pay. Let's make East Bay Mud pay. Let's make somebody else pay. So we can stabilize the rates and make sure that the rate increases as we move forward are less. And when we build these second reservoirs, we can continue to do that. Because like I said, we're resource rich. We have lots of water up here. We want to make sure we can utilize that to the best of our ability. So there's lots of options that we could use that $1.2 million for. And I will give all the options to the board. And last time they took the $600,000 and they put it into the CIP program to do many of the CIP programs, which also is a rate stabilization mechanism, because in the last CIP, the rates, $800,000 of the CIP program every year is put into your rates. So that's fixing canals, fixing the water treatment plants. Every year, you guys are putting $800,000 into that fund so that we can do the work that we need to do for long-term projects. We could take that $800,000 away for a few years with $1.2 million. That's a year and a half of the $800,000. And it definitely would change the rate calculation as we go forward. Would there be no more rate increases? I can't ever say that. I mean, I'm gonna ask one question, and I know this is super unpopular every time we want to raise rates, and I totally understand that. But everybody, next time we come with a rate increase, I would like you to all ask yourself one question. When was the last time that PG&E did not raise your rates? And I hate to say that because I know we all hate PG&E, and I don't want you to hate me. I don't want you to hate this district, but rates don't go down. Rates can stabilize, rates can stay flat, but we don't ever really, I'm gonna tell you that email that I got from PG&E. It really made me more mad than anything. I got an email in January that said they're raising my rates by 19.2%. And I got an email in March that said they were gonna reduce my rates by 4%. Oh, great, so you only raised it by 15%? That's all you did? So, you know, we're not ever gonna do that to you. We're gonna be super transparent. We're gonna tell you what we're spending our money on. We're gonna tell you beforehand what rate increases are gonna come. We're gonna tell you when we can do projects like this, water transfers that will help you. I know that some of you guys all heard, we got a big, huge settlement from PG&E. And I can kind of, we can talk about it now, we got about $7.5 million from PG&E for the damage that they caused to the mosquito fire. Now, some of that is going to be utilized to finish construction projects that happened from the fire. Some of that is going to be utilized to build a solar project at the Sweetwater treatment plant that will bring revenue back in. I love it because we are hitting PG&E on both ends. We got their lawsuit money and we're not giving them rate money anymore. So we got to hit them on both sides of the fence. Those are all things that we are using now to stabilize the rates here. So I just want any misconceptions to not be, you know, held in this room or in this community that I'm going to give this water away. If I tell Westlands that they can have 3,000 gallons, 3,000 acre feet of water this year, it is the only time that is, we are obligated to transfer water to them. Just because we're transferring water to them does not mean this water goes away forever. And I read Facebook, I read all the different stuff that happens around the community, I listen to the voices, everybody says, well, if you transfer it, then they're just gonna take it from you forever and ever and ever. That doesn't happen unless you agree to do it forever and ever and ever, and we're not even thinking about agreeing to do it forever and ever. This is a one-time thing that will happen 1 year. Maybe next year we explore it again, but again, it's called a temporary water transfer, not a permanent water transfer. So I'm gonna tell you about PCWA. They have a 25,000 acre foot of water permanent transfer every year. They get paid for it, so don't get me wrong, it's not detrimental to them, but they have to transfer water every year, whether they want to or not, because they have a long-term agreement with people. We are not setting up any long-term agreements with Westlands. These are all individual 1 year agreements when we do this. So I think this is my last slide, and I will just take any questions. We have not agreed to anything. Everything is preliminary. I just want to keep reiterating that. We have made talks. We will find out at the next board meeting. This will be on every board meeting agenda, April 6th, May 13th. And I have proposed to them and I'm saying if we decide to do a water transfer, it will be heard at the May 13th water meeting. So May 13th is going to be very exciting because it's going to be urban plan, water transfer, budget. So bring your dinners, your lunches. It's going to be a long one.
And the annual water assessment too, isn't that May?
That's April.
That's April.
I was gonna say, I think.
Okay, move on.
Nicholas, you weren't here the last water transfer.
Yes.
I was, but I didn't know the justification to decide that 2,000 was the appropriate number.
Yes.
I'm wondering, because we're saving roughly another 1,000 acre feet due to canal linings and efficiencies. And some of the savings or the revenue based on that was $400 per acre foot. Into rate stabilization, but if it went into more canal lining, it could then maybe increase it or give us the availability to do 3,500 down the road. And so it's a cycle. You invest in yourself, put back into yourself.
100%. And I want to make sure, you said something great. Canal lining, rate stabilization, those two things are not different from each other, because when you are doing canal lining, you are also stabilizing the rates, because that is something that we already have locked into our CIP plan. So we are taking money to do work that already would be paid for by the rates. So you're doing both. You're killing two birds with one stone. By lining canals, becoming more efficient, you then have more water that you're not using and more water that you have to transfer, but you're also stabilizing the rates. So you're kind of doing a lot of things all together.
Okay.
So I have two comments to add to that. So one is, for the next meeting, if we can add the water transfer policy that we
Yes,
created.
yeah, we will.
Cause that was, after the last transfer and we had a whole bunch of questions and there were maybe 20 problems that people brought up on Facebook and we addressed them all. That's why we have a water consultant and we fixed all the problems we had except one. That's why I still go to DC, still talk to the Bureau of Reclamation. We're trying to get that one transfer agreement filled, but they also came up with the analysis of how much can we transfer. So a lot of that stuff came through our water policy, and it does include things like the wet years, dry years, the voluntary agreement, so that's all in there. So that's something good to look at.
And I will say, the water transfer policy is very thorough. And it does set marker points, and the reason that we're here today, obviously, this was urban plan. But this water transfer town hall is also one of the marker points, so we are going to continue to do this and meet with the customers, meet with the public. We do a meeting in January to initiate a potential letter that goes to the state. We don't necessarily do that, February is kind of on or off, depending on what the water year looks like. But in March, we do hey, we've had these talks, we'd like to continue, the board says yay or nay, continue or don't continue. Then, once we have some interest, we call a water transfer town hall, this is the second one we've done. We did one in 2024, the market unfortunately did not bear a water transfer because we got a big lot of rainstorms right after that. And unfortunately, it became an above normal year and nobody did water transfers throughout the whole state. So this is kind of the third marker point for water transfer. We wanted to make sure we didn't have the same issues we had last time where everybody didn't understand what was going on, that there was a lot of misconceptions and a lot of people didn't have the ability to kind of talk to their neighbors and say, hey, here's why it's good. And I'm gonna ask one thing of you, Ann, if you want to advertise the urban water management plan, be a good advocate and say why a potential water transfer is either good or bad, whether your opinion, you like this or not. I think we're trying to make a good case for why it could be a positive for the district. All I'm asking for is that people talk in facts and people don't talk in what they think is going to happen, because that's where we get misinformation and people start to get really angry with each other and we start to have issues. I will never address anybody on Facebook. I have learned that it is too hard for me as a public figure to start addressing people on Facebook. The board, you guys can do how you like. I have always directed my staff, it's just not worth it to get involved, because you will never get say the right words to get people to understand. But the people that I can utilize are the customers that I can talk to. If you ever have any questions, you can call me. My cell phone number is on my card, and I forgot to bring, actually I have some on my backpack. If anybody wants my card, I will give you my cell phone number, and I've told Ann, you can call me at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I guarantee I will pick up the phone. Because I sleep that light, and I will answer, and I will talk to anybody about this district. I eat, sleep, and breathe this district. I want to see good things happen here in the Divide. I took this job not for a paycheck, I took this job because I wanted to make a difference in the water industry. And I've said that every time I've come up here, every time I've stood in front of a room. So please, all I'm asking is for you all to trust me that I have this district and this community's best interest in our.
So if you're Stovall.
Well, Mitch mentioned about how we have water right now, just spill it over the dam because of what we've been conserving through canal lining and so on. And roughly that's 2,500 acres over that. You also mentioned it about the market. I remember looking at what the market for water 4 years ago, and I think it was about $1,000 an acre. Because that was during the drought. And so I'd like to hear the board hear some rationale, the benefit of transferring $3,000, 3,000 acre feet this year, at roughly maybe $400 an acre foot, versus doing half of that and seeing what the market's gonna do next year. Granted, it's a crystal ball, but is there a benefit of seeing what the market's gonna be next year?
Yeah, I want to clarify one point you said. Water transfer dollars, it's different for wherever you're talking within the state. So if you're transferring a drop of water, and I'm just gonna use really hyperbolic language, if you're transferring water from the Oregon border to the Mexican border, you're probably gonna pay $3,000 an acre foot. But the person up here, the guy at the very top, doesn't see $3,000. So like when we transferred to Westland, we got $300 an acre foot. But Westlands, by the time it got to their service area, I believe that they paid $1,000 or $1,100. And that's where I talk about the leave behind. So they have to pay the federal government, they have to pay the state, they have to pay to pump the water, they have to pay all along the way for all those drops of water to make it to their service area. So like when I was in Southern California and I worked down there, we would pay about $2,500 of transfer water to get water from Oroville to us. So it's a lot of money, but say in Oroville, you only see a portion of that. So to answer your question, in 2020, I'm gonna use real-time examples. In 2020, we transferred 2,000 acre feet. We got $300. In 2021, when it was a really critically dry year, the transfer market was between $600 and $700 for this area. We would have seen $600, $700. So the district probably left $200 an acre foot on the table. And I don't think that anybody really knew what that could have meant. So it was, I don't think anybody did anything wrong. But it's just kind of that crystal ball of not understanding and knowing where it's gonna come. So the benefit, the cost benefit is you could transfer 1,500 or 2,000 acre foot this year. And next year is a glut year, water heavy year, and you don't get any other transfer. Or you transfer 1,500 or 2,000 this year, and next year is super dry, and you are able to take the additional 1,000 to 1,500 acre feet of water and earn more money on it. I'm not gonna tell anybody what to do. That's the decision that I'm gonna present to the board, and the board has to make that decision. I will say the cost benefit of that. But basically, I can't make that decision without direction from the board. I have staff who do look at the weather moving forward, but I mean, the weatherman can't even get the weather right next week, let alone next year. So I have to be very, very careful and try to benefit the district in the best way I can. I'm going to see what the market bears. If the market bears closer to $400 an acre foot, I think you do the full 3,000. If the market bears closer to $300 an acre foot, I think you do 1,500 to 2,000, and you see what happens next year. Because that cost benefit is, if you get 500 next year, you aren't really saving or making any more money if you have 400, but if you're at 300 and you make 500 next year, you are making a lot more money. Does that make sense? That kind of difference in that, you know, the differences are not great enough, and you're done, you have the money, and your money can make money at that point. So you put it in the bank and you can still make money on that money, and you're gonna end up with more in the long run. So I know that's a whole extra fiscal analysis.
And before I get to Director Fisher, one more wrinkle to that, can Robert or you or Adam add about CVP and state water project restrictions on transfers some years? So some years they may say they're at capacity and not allow water transfers.
That's what happened in 24. We were at capacity. They could only pump 40% of the water allocation. So anytime you get near 40% is where you cannot pump any more water through the system. So we're at 20% now, and so there is that capacity to pump water through the system. I hope you don't mind I stepped on your guys' toes. You did ask you guys, but I know that the 40% is the number that they share. I worked for a state water contractor before I worked here, so I understand the system and how that operates, because that was what I did every day.
Thank you. Director Fisher?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate for the audience and any later listeners that, you know, this board has not made any decision on the transfer. The decisions that this board has made so far are to keep our place in line so we didn't lose the ability to make a transfer, but we have not made any commitment to transfer water.
Absolutely.
And Nick, you can attest that I'm still really trying to educate myself on this, because since the short time I've been on the board, this has been the main fear I've heard from constituents is what happens. There is a fear out there that if you sell this water, the state will look at you and say, well, gee, I guess you didn't need it, so you don't need it. And I think I'm becoming more and more comfortable that in itself is not true. But we've also talked some, and I think this is what you're trying to correct directly with the Bureau of Reclamation, but there is a risk if uncorrected. And to tell me if, I'm gonna tell you what I heard from you, you can correct me and see if I got it right. But the Bureau also has kind of a claim on that water that if we were to release it at a time not to their need or what have you, and it flows out of Folsom Lake, that they have some kind of a claim to come back and say you need to replenish that water Which could potentially mean if we sold 3,000, we'd be on the hook for 6,000, because we'd have to
That's that.
replenish that. So
That's
that,
really careful, because that's where I wanna make sure that.
and that's where I wanted to, yeah, if you could really educate on the facts, because I think that's where the risk lies.
Give me the
That's what I
first
wanna hear.
point one more time so I can make, because I have the first point and then I'll do the second point. You said,
That not only Westlands has a claim, but somehow, because
Oh,
the water
yeah,
runs
sorry.
from Stumpy through Folsom to
so the
Westlands.
first one was, does the state look at you and say, well, you obviously didn't need this water anymore? And I will say the evidence and the history of that is no, because we haven't done a lot of water transfers, but other agencies have done a lot of water transfers. So there is a precedence that has been set that the state can't come in. Plus, we have a really unique set of water rights that are called pre-14, or they call them senior water rights, and our water rights are better than everybody else's. I know that's, whatever, take that for what it's worth. When I was in Southern California, we had what they called junior water rights. We had 1964 water rights. So they were worthless on the open market. We could sell our water to other contractors, but nobody wanted to buy our water because we couldn't really tell them that they could have it. The state right now, as it sits today, and I'm not gonna say in the future because everybody's trying to attack the water rights system, but as it sits today, the state really can't tell us what to do. They can say, hey, we really want you to stop, not use water, but they can't take our water rights away because of the system that's been put in place. Our water rights are traced back to 1853. We're like one of the first 10 or 20 water right holders in the entire state of California. So we're doing okay in this, in terms of where our water rights come from. That is not a huge concern of mine. The second concern, was, sorry, I wanna make sure I got it right.
When we have a hold, the Bureau of
Oh, okay,
Reclamation.
yeah, sorry. So say we transferred 3,000 acre feet of water. And this happened last year, or excuse me, in 2020 and 2021, to some extent. So you put this 3,000 acre foot hole or shadow water in your reservoir. If if Folsom is not in flood operations and the belt is not in excess, you are still beholden to that water to them. Because what it basically says is, if you hadn't transferred that water would have come into Folsom Lake as spill water over your dam.
Yeah.
Which is totally, they're not wrong. Now, when we have X number of acre feet of water that spill, and Folsom is then spilling because it's a flood control situation, then we start to clear those off. So it's so many days of so much flow, we start to check off the days in the boxes of how much we are basically paying back. Now, in 2021, it was a very, very dry, critically dry year. So we had done a 2,000 acre foot transfer the year before, so we had this hole in our reservoir. With it being such a dry year, the Bureau came to us and said, you need to release a portion of that water because we don't know if more water is going to come. So we had to release about 560 acre feet of water. It wasn't water that we lost. It wasn't water that was extra water. It was water that was beholden to the Bureau of Reclamation. So are we on the hook for that 3,000 acre foot of water? I can't say no, but I can say only if the Bureau asks for it because it's a dry year.
But it's never, that water would have been spill water.
Yeah.
It's not like you add.
Yeah.
500 acre feet to the field.
Also, Folsom was releasing
Too much.
in anticipation of
Yes.
water coming down. So they were actually doing a release to make
100%.
space, which then wasn't really giving us the same opportunity of, okay, this is what's in there, and then when this water gets added, then it's a spill. They were spilling, dropping the level, so when
100%.
ours came, it didn't give it the same level,
You're
and that's what I caught was when I'm here, it hits the news that they're doing a pre-release in anticipation of a snow melt or whatever it was at the time. And that's when I went back to whoever we had as a contractor and said, why is it okay that they did this? And now our water's coming in and it isn't, our water's gonna have to keep coming in to backfill this reservoir and make the release.
So you're 100% correct. That is exactly what happened. And that's what I was trying to say in the beginning was the Bureau was operating in an what was the word I used? They were operating in a manner that they had never operated before in their life. And so that was one of the things where we were like, hold the phone here. How are you can make decisions on the fly and then you can hurt us by making these decisions on the fly. So those are the caveats that we're trying to put into the refill agreement that says if you start operating in a manner that is gosh, I had a whole word for it.
Not normal.
It's not normal, but yeah.
Unconventional?
What?
Unconventional?
Unconventional, there's a legal term for it, and I'll have our lawyer put it in there for sure.
Non-typical.
But if you, non-typical, yes, if you start operating in a non-typical fashion, we then can come back to the table and say, you are not doing this fairly. So those are the changes that we are trying to make to the refill agreement.
And
And it-
stupidly, they put that out in public, in the news.
Well, I mean,
That's how
I don't think it was them doing it, I think it was
Well,
people
whatever,
catching it.
that's how I caught it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And one of the things when I first got here in 22, it was like, I think it was Adam and Jeff Meyer, who was our previous contractor, and he was with Western Hydrologic, tried to explain to me the refill agreement, and I'm like, but Folsom is operating right now. And they're like, well, the Delta's not, but it's not because Shasta's not, and it was, so there's all these weird, like the check boxes just didn't add up. And so me coming in with like fresh eyes, I looked at this and I was like, not right, but it ended up clearing out the next year. So it wasn't a huge issue, but it definitely was something that the board had brought up that was not right. So we wanted to make sure that it's not gonna happen like that in the future. I can't change every piece, I can't make the and or without their approval, but we can at least put in some caveat language that makes it, so if you do something weird, then we can come back to you.
And there also was that contract issue.
Yeah.
That when we were looking at. Was it the Bureau's contract?
Yeah, that was refill.
It's like vague, and you're like, well. You're having us give you an open, a blank check, basically,
And the
and
second part to that was, we had to do all of these, contracts before we got the refill agreement. So
Yes.
And that will continue, unfortunately,
And we don't have.
we
control of
do
that.
not have control over
But you
that.
can whine.
We can whine, we can complain, and honestly, I will say, for whatever you think about the administration in Washington right now, they are probably in the best state to negotiate with them because they want to release water for farmers. They have a need and a want to bring this water to other areas, so we can leverage that want by changing the language in there, by going to Washington. That's why we're tapping Bureau representatives in Washington, and that's who I'm gonna make sure is involved in this refill agreement, so that they can see the weirdness that we have to deal with out here in the West. And I know Director Saunders has worked on this, I had worked on this, we've met directly with Washington DC representatives to fix this issue, so it's definitely something that's on our radar and we wanna make sure not happen.
We got Director McDonald, and then I'll go to Brooks.
I remember I was brand new on the board and I was the one that asked the question about the refill agreement. And I didn't understand it and he didn't have an answer, and that's what started the whole thing. That was about 5 years ago. I just want clarification. A bird in hands were two in the bush. I'd like to think that sell it while you can instead of rolling the dice, but yes, $400 maybe now. Best case scenario, $600 perhaps if it's a dry condition and there's a higher demand. But if it's a capacity year and we can't get $6 an acre foot for it, and no one wants our water, then you take the chance of a big goose egg. Is that because of capacity, because there's too much water in the system, or they just have enough and they just don't want it? What's this distinction?
Both, I mean, I say both. So in 24, when they wanted to transfer water.
Yeah.
There was a capacity issue. So they couldn't physically move the water. In 25, there was too much water in the system and nobody wanted to buy water. So it's a 6 and 1, half dozen the other. You have different things that happen at different times. that cause us to not be able to transfer.
Yeah.
So,
I say take it while you can get it, but.
that's why I'm saying if it's closer to 4, then you're good to do the whole thing, I think, because it is, it's a benefit. If it's 3 or less, then you wanna start to think about whether or not you don't want to
Yeah.
do the whole thing.
Thank you for clarifying.
Director Stover.
From your crystal ball, given.
I don't have one.
Here's your crystal ball.
From the.
Given the unknown with Colorado River water,
Oh, it's
does
gonna
that
be-
affect the value of our water?
Not yet, not yet, eventually, but
I mean, we can't get our water where they need it anyway.
yeah, I think putting our water to some beneficial use and showing that we're willing to put it in other areas is beneficial to us in the long run. I know that may sound counterintuitive, but if we don't, then people are gonna come in and say, well, you got 20,000 acre feet up here, you're only using 9,000 a year, what are you gonna do with the other 10? We're gonna take it from you. So, but then we say we're taking, 2 to 3 to 4 of this and we're already spreading it around and we're doing our part. So we have those types of arguments that we can have. So, yeah, it does, today, the Colorado River thing is not going to affect us in the future, the very near future. It will affect us and it could potentially make those water prices go up. It's all about supply and demand. And that's why, $600 in 21, there was just more demand than there was supply. So people were willing to pay more for it. And then when people are getting cut off, I mean, they're looking to take the Colorado River from 2 million acre feet to 700,000 acre feet, which is a huge reduction. And that puts us in a really strong position to have, if we have 2 other reservoirs, puts us in a really strong position to be able to maximize our resource that we have.
And I'd say there's 2 caveats to that. So one caveat is, what we do with our legislative watch to know that when those waters becomes a stronger need down south, that we're gonna have to really put a lot on somebody called Mr. Splendorio, who's not here tonight, where we may be doing in a fight for water rights. So we're really gonna have to protect our water rights. And second is the water market will not be as much climate based anymore if there's a shortage from Colorado, which means there will be a ongoing shortage every year in California.
They had a documentary, Lake Mead and the Hoover Dam, and Southern California is in huge trouble and they gotta get all the states together. And
Yep,
yeah, it's bad. And they put a diversion tunnel. If they didn't spend billions and billions to go into the bottom of Lake Mead, Vegas would be a ghost town now.
Sort of, they've changed the operations, but
Okay.
yeah, sort of. It's more full now than it was, but yeah, that was a huge
Yeah, it
issue.
went up 40 feet, but it's still down hundreds.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
so we have to, the next, look to see what the December, agreements are gonna be on the Colorado River, and that will let us know if the states are gonna do it or the administration's gonna do it. And
Yeah.
the administration has a little vendetta against California, so it may not be good if the states don't do it, but.
Yeah.
All right, did anybody else have comments? Director Seaman, anything else?
I'm fine.
Director Stovall?
Thank you.
Director Fisher?
Very informative, thank you.
Director McDonald?
Good.
Public? Ms. Saunders? The rights?
We can't see if there's anybody up on the.
Yeah.
We will see,
You can turn this off.
we'll switch to, Cherie or Ray, any,
I
comments?
would say,
Hold on a second.
from my perspective, it's imperative, if this is. I will acknowledge a bias here that I am not really in favor of transferring water, it's just that. It actually comes from where I come from. I came from Mendocino County, lived up there for most of my life, before moving over here. And there was a big fiasco with, Lake Mendocino, where the Board of Supervisors, as I recall, literally sold the water rights to that lake to Sonoma County. And, they used it to fill up, what's that lake, the Dry Creek or something up there by Hillsbury.
Like.
Mendocino County during this most recent, drought, several years ago, when we would drive home to visit family and friends back there. Lake Mendocino was literally a mud puddle in the middle of that, what used to be, Coyote Valley. So I'm skeptical And so I understand people being skeptical about selling water rights. So my point here is that all of these things that you're bringing up about why this will work out for the district, this is the kind of stuff that absolutely needs to be communicated
Yes.
to everybody in this district, either through Facebook and open meetings or whatever, posters in town, get people to come to meetings. Because, you know, no one's gonna buy into this. They're gonna be thinking the same thing that I'm thinking, that, you know, I remember drought years in Mendocino County when we did not have water. The city of Ukiah wasn't sure they were gonna have enough domestic water for
It was bad.
people. While people are swimming in the lake down
Yep,
Lake
exactly.
Sonoma.
Like, no,
It's Lake Sonoma, yeah.
And put it in our newsletter, and just to clarify, we are transferring water, and it would probably considered surplus water. We never sell our water rights, so our water rights are gonna remain with us.
Yes.
So, yes.
And I
One
get
time
that.
temporary transfer,
And that
but
gives me
yes.
some comfort.
Yes. Mhm.
But it's the surplus water. It's
Exactly.
like, how much are they really gonna drain? Is something gonna look, you know, like
Yes.
a mud puddle in the middle,
Correct,
like we saw
And
in
it's,
Lake Mendocino when we went this year was that.
So the lowest it's been since I've been here is 13,000, and it's still, I mean, it was low. You could
Yeah.
definitely tell it was low, but it wasn't.
And that crystal ball that says we're really gonna get
Yeah, no, I understand.
50 inches of rain next year, I don't.
I don't have one. I know that,
I'll bring mine.
maybe at home Donna has one, but she didn't bring it to work today, or she didn't bring it to the board meeting today. So I'm not gonna rely on it. But I do have to look at the best interest for the district, and if that does happen, we would never take the water below a level like we talked about in the urban plan.
Yeah,
So we know how much we need for the urban plan to be there. So we're not gonna take this lower than it needs to be. And you said something, and I know you said it a certain way, and I wanna make sure that I'm clarifying. You said they sold their water rights. I wanna look into this camera and I'm gonna say,
yeah.
I would never advocate for these water rights of this divided community to be sold. Whether or not if the board ever told me to sell the water rights for this community, I would quit.
Yeah.
Because that is not a sustainable district, that is not a sustainable community, and that will be the death of this community.
Yeah.
This is a temporary water transfer, and this could help the community to thrive. Because what it will do will bring untold revenue to the district, unseen revenue. So let me ask you a question, and then, you know, I know you're very vocal about this. That surplus water, it could sit up there and be 3,000 acre foot that we can look at.
Mhm.
Or it can be transferred to Westlands, and it can be $1.2 million that you don't have to pay out of your pocket, or anybody on the camera doesn't pay out of their pocket, or the board doesn't have to pay out of their pocket. So you have to look at both things, you know. It's great that it's up there, and like I said, I'm never gonna take the water to a level where we would have an issue. But is it worth it to the district to look to the future of how we can use that resource?
And there are a lot of people in this district that are really happy to have that water to drive up and look at.
I totally understand, and
Now you
but I
for $1 million
think
bucks.
every month they get mad though. Every month they might get mad.
All right, we have, Sheree.
Yes, let me get to I just got a thing on Facebook from, Heather Waldron of KCRA. And she states that, the US Drought Monitor are now counting the Sierra as abnormally dry. North Sierra is at just 8% of average for snowpack. Just, for thought. And then also, can we have a detailed estimate of how much the attorney's costs are going to be and the monitoring costs? Because the last time the attorney's costs were just outrageous, like 100,000. I actually never even got an actual amount for it. But I'd like at the meeting that it has some type of breakdown.
So in the agreement,
Was that in the previous water transfer?
Previous water transfer.
Is that what she's talking
Yeah,
about?
the previous one.
when we developed the last agreement with Westlands, those attorney costs were borne by Westlands.
Yeah.
So I will show you when that agreement comes, what we're referring to, that is not borne by the district. And then you asked one other question. Oh, the monitoring. So you have the
Yeah.
gentleman in the room that is monitoring it. and we already pay him every year to do this type of work. So they're gonna do the monitoring, they're gonna look at the gauges, they're gonna look at do the reports for the state, and we already have a contract with them. It's a $25,000 per year contract, we don't spend it, and if they don't do the work, but it's already there in the works, and that's the max that we would have to pay for stuff like that.
Okay, because company was out of Placer County and it seemed like it was extra large, the charges that were coming through. And also, I believe our local attorney also charged something.
Yeah, we've changed since then, and we've changed our policy, and our water consultant is also our grant consultant, so we get great value from our consultants.
Okay, so whatever it is, please disclose it so we know what you're talking and what the net is going to be.
Yeah,
I would say that we are being far more transparent with this process than it's ever been before. And I will assure you, all of that information will be presented to the public in staff report, in the board report, in presentation.
Okay, well, part of the problem, Christina was in the middle of transferring from the one mom over to Tyler, and nobody could actually find how much was deposited, and it was kind of a mess. So it just needs to be more transparent.
I can assure you, whether you agree with us or not, I think we are far more transparent than we were in 2020.
And Sheree, thank you for doing the work you did to try to get the word out about tonight's meeting. Appreciate you doing that.
Director McDonald?
Yeah, I do recall after a while, it was $300,000 net after all
No, it
costs.
was 660 net. It was
Excuse me.
more than that.
The number you
I'm sorry,
said.
you're right. I'm sorry. It was less, it was more than that, but it was.
Yeah, and regarding the concerns and the fear about the muddy pond scenario, is in the communication of the public, you know, people could look at Facebook and they get email blasts. Do we get newsletters anymore?
Yes.
We haven't done any newsletter because we didn't have anybody to do it, but we are looking to implement the
Because
newsletter.
everybody gets a bill.
We're looking to do it as an online newsletter as opposed to a print newsletter, because it was literally costing us, the district, about 20 grand a year to do the print newsletters. But we are looking to do it through WaterSmart and having news stories that go out through WaterSmart.
Okay, because yeah, is it worth $1 million to have a pretty view? But you know what I'm saying? What's the cost? And
The other thing to add to that before I get to Director Seaman is we do have a water shortage demand assessment. So anytime you do a water transfer, it is plugged into that to determine what is the actual level we can transfer based on our water shortage demand and our water shortage contingency plan. So even if we say we want to transfer 3,000, then Adam and Robert will give us the, based on where we are that year, based on the water year, how much we can actually transfer to make sure we're above what you're saying. We don't get to that 13,000.
And just, I know you're itching to talk. I just want to say one sentence, I promise, real quick. We have to present that case to the state board. So it's not like nobody's looking at this from an outside perspective. We can tell them what we think is best, and they're gonna tell us whether or not it's best or not. So they could still say no.
All right, Director Seaman?
Okay, let me get into the tree hugger world. So we can drop this lake a certain amount of level, but at some point the lake will be warm and it will have a fish on the effect on the fish and what's in the lake. Do we have those numbers? Because I never hear that brought up in any of our discussions. We're okay at 11,000 acre feet. Is that safe? No big deal. If it drops to 6, all of a sudden now, congratulations, we are now killing fish, warming the lake, blah, blah, blah. Has that ever been looked at, addressed, as numbers that go into this urban water management plan? So we also have to have a level of safety for the environment.
I would say we haven't looked at that specifically, but there is a CEQA analysis that goes into every water transfer. So you do have to look at a variety of different topics when you do a water transfer, and that's
Yeah,
a
but I
warrant.
don't think we've done one.
You did one in 2020. It had to be done. That was where most of the costs that she's referring to went to, was it went into environmental, EIR. It's not an EIR, it's a quick one though. There's a word for it.
NEA.
Environmental assessment or the.
Yeah, but I can't remember the term, it's a,
It goes up as EA and then environmental.
yeah, but you're thinking of NEPA, this is a.
No, I'm not. I'm talking, there's an environmental assessment to get done.
Like, bylaws or resource assessment, cultural assessment, they did that.
Yes, but all that's gonna get done, and all those costs are borne by Westland, so we don't pay those costs.
Well, I'm asking too about us as a district, so we know under the, not necessarily the transfer, but in. When we were just having this discussion on the urban water management plan, is there a level that we have to watch that's a trigger also?
Well, 2015, it got to like 7,000 or 6,000.
I think that's kind of like, what you're referring to, like when you build a reservoir, that's the kind of environmental assessment that happens, and they have like a negative declaration or something like that. When they build a reservoir, they look at the impact of the reservoir at all stages.
What I'm talking about is,
I know what you're talking about there, but that's like,
I'm not talking about the
Yeah,
transfer, not
yeah,
the
yeah,
transfer, I'm
yeah.
talking about,
yeah,
if we have a 3 or 5 year drought and the lake is now at 6,000.
Yeah.
Is that a critical for our lake, that we are now doing harm?
Let's Deadpool at that point, right?
Possibly.
So I know,
What can we
so
do
I know
about
we
it?
have a Deadpool,
No, but-
I know we have a Deadpool level, but I think what she's saying is, I know we had the water management assessment and we've had the, castle plan, so if there's anything in there that has our environmental impact on the certain levels and, temperature and things like that.
Yeah, we don't do it based on fish, though, I know, we probably have temperature models.
It'll be temperature,
But
yeah.
we don't have fish models, I mean, we,
So maybe
a lot of money to
maybe
do
we can
that.
look at temperature models. I know what you're talking about, they really look at in terms of what our flow releases should be for the fish going downstream and when we can release water. But we don't really have that in Stumpy, so maybe we can use temperature models and then that might be the best.
Yeah, because it seems like there would be, seems like we would be required to have something like that. At some point, maybe we've never dropped low enough to make it justified, to have a concerned look, or we haven't had the infamous.
that's
And
what
I think another good thing to do for us especially is there a way we can monitor our temperature throughout the year? Because that's the one thing they look at downstream is the temperature, and are we normally cold all the time based on everybody else? So that may be something we can think of. And I know we pretty much closely are, because people are always, sadly, drowning because it's so cold in the confluence.
Well, that is
So-
because of-
So I'm pretty sure we
We-
are a
we
little
would be
cold.
considered part of the cold water pool if we were to release water. So
Yeah, so maybe that's one thing we can show, that even though that we do have evaporation when it's really dry or not, we're still colder because we're coming directly from a snowpack. So I think that temperature thing is something we can add to like our snowpack survey. That might be something good to look at.
But it's still.
We have a monitoring station up there anyway.
not like the temperature.
But that was a good thing to bring up. That's another good statistic that we can
That's why I
have.
get paid the big bucks.
All right, anybody else? Director Stovall? All right, Sheree, do you still have another question or is your hand still up?
Well, no, it's the same question, but can we get the breakdown of the previous one so we can see what the charges actually were? Because it was never clear when you present the next one. Or do you want me to do a PRA?
We could, when we put out, we can show what the previous one was. We can add it in there. I know it was in a staff report, as Adam said, but we can add the previous one for comparison. This one should
Okay, well-
be,
Yeah, I never
When we-
saw anything and I inquired about it. I know there was a deposit of 430 something thousand in like November, but that's about it.
okay.
There will be, the agreement will be public records to be voted on by the board, so it won't be. This isn't like we can negotiate price behind closed doors. But we can't negotiate the agreement behind closed doors, so before it gets approved, you will have a full chance to review what agreement we put forward with Westlands. And then it
Okay,
has
I'm talking about the previous agreement, just so we
I-
can see the details of that. In the results.
I mean, that's 5 years ago, so it's not really relevant to what we're trying to talk about today. I understand why you're asking, but it's not, it's all gonna be different to what we have today, and we can absolutely try to find it and get it to you. I'm sure it's somewhere.
Well,
It's actually-
yeah,
Oh, what-
2020, it was during COVID, so that's why there was probably a big problem.
Go to the board archive, agendas, it's in there.
Yeah, but it wasn't defined what the end result was charged. How much for the monitoring and how much for the attorney. It wasn't there. Adam probably knows what it is because I remember asking him.
It was in a staff report when we did the transfer, and we can dig up that
Yeah,
staff.
so if
report.
we can find out what was paid by Westland and what we netted, that's, I think, what they're looking for, so that'll be helpful.
And then what the monitoring cost was. And then you said we had no local attorney costs?
I don't know back then, but what I'm trying to tell you is that those costs are borne by the transferee in the new agreement. We worked that all of those things out, and all that will be told to the board. What costs we will bore and what costs they will bore.
Okay, well, I'm concerned with the past one before we get to the new one. I want to know the details of what was in the past that never was really clear.
Yeah, well, the past one.
Gross and net.
The new one, we beat that policy up, so we have more requirements on what is moving forward.
Remember, the board has changed significantly since that last was done, and a lot of those policies was changed specifically because of what happened with that.
Okay, and that was what year? It was 20 or 21?
2020.
2020.
2020, because they agreed to it before I got here.
Yeah, okay. But still, I mean, I'll do a PRA if you don't want to put it in the thing, so I'll just do that.
Ask Cindy.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. What time is it there? 8:40? 8:49. We are adjourned. Our next meeting will be the regular meeting. I believe, what is that, April 6th? April 6th. So see everybody then. Thank you for coming.